Hello and welcome to episode number 11 of this podcast. My name's Elliot Greenman.
I'm Alec Stansfield.
And this week we had your friend and Alec Stansfield.
Alec Stansfield, yeah. Psychotherapist in Throwbridge. Human-given psychotherapist. Really interesting, interactive and great at building rapport. I think the podcast is and the interview is really quite long. Mm-hmm. I think you are a bit techy to start with and talk about different software you're using. So maybe skip the first 15 minutes if you're not very techy involved.
Yeah. And then Alec goes into a little bit of an introduction to himself, how he found the human givens, and then the conversation just goes off into everything around, you know,
health and mental health and polyvagal theory, all sorts. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah. As always, if you want to like, share, comment, or interact in some kind of way, please do. And enjoy the podcast.
Perambulation in Franglais.
So I want to tell you about a tool that I came across recently. Nothing to do with the reason for this podcast. Have you ever heard of the thing called Searchy? No. So Searchy is a new bit of technology that's been launched by a company that we're using for some of our marketing training and stuff. And what it does is quite remarkable, really. It's AI driven. You point it at your podcast or your video, and it allows you to search for any phrase that was spoken. And when the search results, when you click on the results, it takes you straight to that point in the video.
Oh, wow.
Or the podcast.
I've actually got something very, very similar.
Right.
In fact, it sounds exactly the same.
What's it called?
It's called Otter. Otter.ai is their website, and I pay $9.99, and it was actually the main reason I used it was because it was the best AI for writing subtitles on Alexi's voice. Because they were all terrible. Of course,
it's Franglais.
Yeah.
It needs an AI-driven thing, so it learns from.
And also you're going through. If you're going through like an hour, or like the course we're doing, if even like 15-minute section or 5-minute or whatever, it's like you're writing something, and obviously you can't. I can type fast, but nowhere near as fast as he can talk. So then it's like, oh, actually, again, what did he say? So you go back, and to have something that's like about it. With my voice, it's like 90% correct.
Yes.
But with Alexi's, it's like 70. But having that is great because then you just follow it through, and every time the word's being said, every word it's on, it highlights it.
Yes.
And then when it's wrong, I'm like, click that, stop it.
And then it learns.
And then it has this massive text. So I've done it with a handful of our podcasts, which obviously they're like, you know, one of them was like 2 hours, 10 minutes. And then what it does is it brings out a load of keywords.
Yes.
Kind of the same thing, I think.
Yeah,
and then obviously if you click them, it goes straight to the thing, straight to that kind of that section. So
sounds good. I'll look it up.
They're
Searchy and Otter.
And the benefit of it actually allows you to do something like 600 minutes worth of audio for free every month.
Wow.
Which is really good, but you can't download it as a SRT file, which is a subtitle file.
Yes, yeah.
And so that's why I paid for it, because on our podcasts, on the YouTube.
So you put captions on them?
Not yet, but I will do. It's like
because I don't know if you know, I do a video blog. So a couple of times a week, if I can manage it, at least once a week, and I put out the transcript and the audio and the video because people consume in different formats.
Exactly.
I've been told it's important, so let's see how it goes.
It is, because it is. It's
how long have you been doing
important,
that for?
6 or 7 weeks now.
Okay, good.
So I just recorded my 13th one today.
Oh wow.
So.
It's that's like the same thing basically as in fact, if you're doing the vlog, it's like it wouldn't take too much work once you're set up to just put them into a podcast format.
Right. Yes.
So,
yes. I'm aware of that. It's just time.
That's it.
And also,
resources.
I don't know which formats, which platforms to go for. It's interesting to hear you say that you do them all.
Anchor.
We actually, so we use something called Anchor.fm, and it takes you a while to get set up, like 2 or 3 weeks for them to set up all the various accounts with iTunes and with Spotify and Google Podcasts. But you set up all the details, and then it goes away and makes all the accounts, and then it sends you an email when they're all set up, and then you upload it to this one.
Wow.
With you obviously spend time with the title and the description, which you probably do on YouTube anyway, right?
Yeah.
And then it sends them all out.
Brilliant.
And the benefit of podcasts really is that people can listen to it in the car and things like that.
So you get the sound and the image, and
the thing is, because I work from home, I never have time to listen to other people's stuff.
Yeah.
I just don't do it.
Yeah.
I'm never in the car, apart from tonight.
Yeah. Well, actually, I tend to nowadays a couple of evenings a week now. I tend to listen to other podcasts. I've been doing one of the online course from the Human Givens of Joe and Ivan about consciousness, which is like really pretty about their relaton and soleton.
I didn't know that was online.
Yeah, which one is that?
And it's magic. It's magic.
Good.
Yeah.
Which one is that? What's it called?
Like consciousness. It's a discussion about consciousness. It brings it to a bit of another level. And it talk about dark matter and dark energy and soleton and relaton. And it's absolutely, the whole theory behind it is awesome. I mean, it's really I was listening to it, my jaw was like dropped. I was like, oh my God, they're like, that's it. I think they're onto something really quite interesting.
Did you read Godhead?
Yeah, Godhead, yeah. I'm completely addicted to that kind of stuff anyway, because my dad is a Egyptologist.
Oh, is he?
Or amateur Egyptologist.
Yeah.
Mind you, he's written 20 plus books about the whole lot in the last 30 years, 40 years. But
what's a pro Egyptologist?
that's it. But we talk a lot about all the rising a little bit of civilization and all those kind of stuff, with Joe and Ivan are quite into it as well, with all like what is site in Turkey, Göbekli Tepe type saying, which are a bit hunter-gatherers before being a bit sedentarized and saying. And when I went to Egypt, my dad showed me a Nilometer, which is like in a staircase and a ceiling, a sloped ceiling.
Yes.
And he said that's the Nilometer. So you're like, what? You're meant to see the object before you're meant to see the tool before seeing the object. And I was like, not seeing it at all. Well, no, because there's no more flood. But when the flood was going up, depending on the height it was going in the ceiling or the place it was going on the ceiling, you knew that the land had been actually covered with silt to fertilize the whole land. And the further away, the more land was fertilized, the likelihood of your yield getting greater, and therefore you could put imposition, you could tax the people and you knew how much pressure you would be putting your people under in light of that, really. And
I didn't know
that. The Nilometer, I mean, it's like, you look at the thing, you're like, oh my God, it's like proper, it's so magic, really.
So that's what a Nilometer is for?
Yeah, the Nilometer is for the maybe the priests or the pharaoh or all the administration from pharaoh's government or whatever we call it, to actually get an idea about the extent of the flood, and therefore get an extent about how much yield is likely to be coming out of that. And therefore, if you're going to war with the Assyrians and it lasts for a long time and then you squeeze your people, you're going to get a bit of wrath back from them because they're going to be starved a bit and all the rest, really. And you can really manage a bit the taxation to try to manage your population, really, and to keep them...
Sounds just like the Conservative government.
That's it. Or Jeremy when he's going to go to power, because he's going to do that the other way around. It's just like, it's still the same 4,000 years later, really. It's always the same, really. But that's called a Nilometer in the area. And then we were talking about the heliacal rising of Sotis. So in Saqqara, you might not call it Saqqara in English, but in southern Egypt, you've got a stepped pyramid, and you've got a whole complex around it. And in the complex, there's a couple of carving in hieroglyphic. It's like 2000 before Christ or 1800 before Christ type thing. So it's quite a while back. And they talk about a 2,700 year cycle of the heliacal rising of Sotis. Sotis is Sirius, and when Sirius comes and start to rise at the same time as the sun, the flood occurs.
Ah, okay.
So again, the flood. So that whole environmental thing. So you want to know about it, because if it floods, you've got your hut and then you're washed. So you need to know about it. But they knew 2,000 years before Christ, roughly, that it was a 2,700 year cycle.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's the first writing, because 2,000 years before Christ, before that there's no, or maybe a bit of writing, but there's no writing as such, really.
No.
So if you think about some things that have to reproduce itself for you to know it's a cycle, you need to see it let's say 3 times, let's say 4 times, 3 times minimum. So that's, let's say, 10,000 years just to me, and then you got 25 years per generation. You got 400 generations of oral tradition in order to be able to get the knowledge of the fact that it's a cyclical type thing, and then the rising, so it's not quite exact. Yeah. And the rising and the flood doesn't quite occur from one year to the next over 10, like between the 2 glaciation to when the I mean it's
incredible.
So like the passage of knowledge and how relevant the whole thing, our metaphors could have been playing a big role about that. Well, actually, because it's a hieroglyph, it's actually a metaphor. All the rest, so all that part is from Godhead is just like Lascaux and Chauvet and all the whole lot is. I mean, it's I'm mind boggled by the whole lot, really.
I've only got like maybe I think 2.5 chapters into Godhead. Mm-hmm. It's really hard going though. I'm not a particularly strong reader, and there's a lot of stuff in there that I don't have like a base knowledge of. That you and Alexi, you two probably do, but I do really like it. So far as it actually making sense of, it completely changed my perspective or my view on the left and the right side of the brain. I was like, that makes complete sense, rather than someone just being like, you're autistic or you have this or something.
I feel very privileged to have been taught by Joe and Ivan, and because they're not doing very much teaching now, as far as I understand, and it's certainly changed my whole approach to understanding humans and myself and everything else.
How did you find human givers?
How did I come across it?
Because I looked at your LinkedIn profile today.
Oh, okay.
So it's just like, and I noticed that you were a chiropractor or something.
I worked for the McTimoney Chiropractic College in the 90s, but at that time I was my career doesn't really qualify as a career, because I've done lots of different things and made some rather dramatic changes, because I've always prioritized doing interesting work over earning money. And so I've made changes which have seen my income drop as well as go up. Yeah. And at that time in the 90s, I'd spent 15 years, maybe 20 years, learning all the skills that I needed to set up my own electronics business. I started in electronics. I was an electronic engineer in my original studies. And I didn't want to be just a design engineer. I wanted to look at servicing and production and management and HR. And I wanted to collect all the different skills that I would need so that I could create my own company and do my own thing, because I don't like being told what to do. But what happened is that I had a young family, and by the time I got to a position where I kind of knew enough to make the next step, I realized I was already working too many hours a week. I didn't want to work 24 hours a day or even 18. And I had a sort of early midlife crisis where I kind of thought, actually, do I want to run my own company? Do I want to do all this stuff? I'm actually feeling quite exhausted. And I looked round for a complete change. And because I had some management and admin skills, as well as production and software and lots of different things, I applied for a job to be the managing director of the McTimoney Chiropractic School without really expecting to get it at all. But I was always confident in interviews. I liked interviews. I liked showing off, I guess. And I got the job, and I found myself running running the school at a time when the chiropractic profession was going through regulation. So when I started, it was unregulated, and when I finished, it was in the early throes of being a highly regulated profession, similar to what psychotherapy is going through right now. And I had an office, and I realized then that I'd never really worked with women. The women I'd worked with in engineering had been women who had a kind of a male approach to their careers. Yeah, left
brain.
And
when was this? Like what time?
This would have been 93, 94, maybe 92, 93, maybe. And I was out of my depth. I didn't know what I was doing. Trying to manage an office full of 6 women. I think every one of them resigned while I was there at one point due to conflict or stress or whatever. And it was interesting. I loved doing it. I learned a lot about well-being and health. But I wasn't... What broke my heart was that the profession was going from being focused on helping people improve their well-being to becoming a accredited professional business.
Mm-hmm.
And the heart went...
mercantile.
Yeah, the heart went out of it. And at the end of the period that I worked for them, the government were requiring that to be a chiropractor, you had to have a degree. Mm-hmm. Well, the original idea of chiropractor, healing by hand, wasn't an academic thing at all.
It was a diploma. Yeah.
You didn't need to know great details of anatomy and physiology. I mean, it was good to know some, but the idea that you needed to be scientifically trained and you had to have A-levels and qualifications and all this before you could even apply to be in the school, it seemed bonkers to me. And I was disheartened, and I left and looked for other things again.
I did my training as an osteopath in that time as well.
Right.
Where the profession had to... so I've got a diploma and a degree.
Yes.
Because we were the first to actually go through the school in 1998. So there was the whole profession was completely revamped. Yeah. And a good third or a bit more of the profession left, basically, because they didn't agree. And there was a lot of that talking about the whole thing, really, of being a bit where we are manual therapists, we are craft people, really.
Yes,
we're
not academics.
We're not academics.
We don't need to do research.
That's it. Or the type of research you're asking us to do is actually a bit too scientific, and it's a bit too quantitative, and it's not enough qualitative aspect of it, which actually would be a bit like Carl Rogers and all those people with a humanistic approach and trying to, in a psychotherapy kind of world, to try to have a scientifically demonstrable kind of way, or it can be scrutinized from a with a scientific way of doing, but it's not really it's not actually quantitative, it's more qualitative kind of research. So I did my training like that. And
I think the difficulty with an academic, I'm not anti-academic, I'm not anti-research either. I think it's right to be asking questions and learning. Mm-hmm. But the changes that they introduced, when you start to manualize or try to write down, proceduralize an approach, and they're doing it with therapy now, and of course cognitive behavioral therapy lends itself quite well to be manualized. You can write it down. It's a structured approach. But helping people who are struggling with mental health issues is as much an art as a science. And I think if you try to write down the exact steps of how you must approach it, you're going to miss the point. And that's...
Well, it's quite strange because it's quite with the course we are doing, it's a little bit what I'd like to bring a framework for people to be able to organize a little bit their way of approaching the whole thing.
Yes.
But as an approach, not as a technique.
Yes.
So if we talk about dermatomal or like cutaneous distribution, skin area of your pain, you can draw a little bit the area, but it gives you information a little bit, and you can address it with foam rolling or acupuncture or TENS machine or whatever really you've been familiarized with or you're actually comfortable with, because maybe you don't like the way the TENS machine works, all those kind of things really. So therefore you still get quite a lot of an artistic flow is enabled a little bit, because it's a bit the way you go about doing your own thing. But you need, I think, the whole beauty of
the framework. Yes,
you need the framework. That's it. So the APET framework and things like that is really an interesting way to see a bit the sequence of things happening, really. And when you go from the thought to the emotion, and then you miss the pattern matching, and then you get to an activating agent, you miss a bit the it's like intellectual to, it's a bit quite strange really. It's a bit, it works, but it's a very lengthy process. We want people to have access to a bit better well-being through a framework that will actually, in a scientific framework, which enables them to maybe mitigate some of the changes in their environment a bit faster, in a way, and for them to cope a bit better, and then they can expand on it as much as they want, really. We can we can do a bit of counseling, or I can go to a human-given therapist, and then it's quite an interesting thing for problem solving, the current problem solving, but it doesn't mean I can't do a bit of psychoanalytical work in order to really delve a bit more into the deeper meaning, or however I want to explore the thing, really. So I'm very interested in that humanistic and or modernistic or neo-modernistic way of actually going about it, really, and that catextic thing, because if you use reason, it's great, but
it's just one tool.
That's it.
There are other tools.
That's it. There are other tools, really. Yeah. And being able to be critical and rational is quite interesting. But if you're too aroused, if you don't know how to de-arouse yourself, you can't really be that rational in a way, really. Yeah. And that's the whole thing, really. So I'm always a bit pulled because a lot of what I do as well is in the flow as well. And when you're in the flow, you pick up so much information. You end up talking about things to people, and you end up focusing on something, and then it happens, and you've got no idea where did it come from.
And that happens in the therapy room. I've so many times I've come up with a suggestion, and people, how did you know that? Or why did I don't know where it came from. Pulled it out of the ether somehow.
God.
God, yeah.
Came from God, probably.
Yeah, the SGOD word is quite interesting always. But
how did you come across human givens, though?
Sorry, I didn't answer your question, did I? How did I get into it?
The only reason I asked that is because I've been reading about loads of different models for I think it was probably about 6 years, and off the back of being a Christian, and then it took me so long. It was through Alexi that I came across human givens, right? And since then, I don't think I've met anyone else who knows about human givens.
Oh, right, okay.
And for me, it's just everything I've read that I've regardless, whether it's a book by a psychologist or something, or doctor or professor of like the chimp paradox for me was quite big, because it was that's something that I can really relate to and figure it's really helped me to a certain level. Everything I read fit just unbelievably well into the human givens kind of framework. Yeah. And it was you can almost map all these different books into different areas of learning from the human givens, and it's why
it's very exciting, isn't it?
Why isn't this?
Well, when I will answer your question in a minute, but when I first trained, I was so blown away by the simplicity, the efficiency, the fact that it worked, just the results that you got as a therapist. I still remember the first spider phobia that I did just blew me away. It was a one session, and it was a lifetime's phobia removed in one go. I didn't know I could do that, but I was so excited that I thought that within 5 years everybody will be knocking on the door looking for their nearest human givens therapist. I had no idea how the real world worked, and here we are 16 years later, and you haven't met other people who know about it. And actually, ideas don't spread because they're good ideas. Ideas spread through, there are many factors, and how good the idea is just one factor of many. And it's taken me a while to kind of get my head around that.
That's completely nuts, isn't it?
Yes. And to answer your question, after at around the time I was working with McTimoney, I think it was just shortly afterwards, my first marriage fell to pieces. We stopped communicating, and I couldn't find a way to get the communication going again. And we divorced. I walked out of my family, which is a very difficult thing to do. My children were 8 and 11 at the time. And shortly after that, I was burgled, and I became quite profoundly depressed. And depression was a real shock to me, because I'd always lived on my wits. I'm not physically strong. I've always used my head, and I've ducked and dived and dodged and changed career and done lots of things, but always learning and always applying my knowledge in different formats. And suddenly I couldn't use my head. I couldn't think. I couldn't make decisions. I couldn't prioritize. I was aware that I was disabled in a strange way. And I was absolutely just floored by depression. It just stopped me in my tracks. And I had no idea what had happened to me. And it puzzled me, because I like to try and understand things as much as is possible. And although I wasn't depressed for very long, I think it was 2 or 3 months. I think most people come out of depression within 4 months, typically, without assistance, and that's the natural course of things. Of course, it doesn't always happen like that. People do get stuck in it for many, many years. But I was lucky. I came out without medication and without any long-term damage. But I was that seed was sown of what the heck just happened to me. And later on, I met my now wife, and she was, this is Bindi, she was working as a health visitor. She had a background as a nurse in the NHS. And she was doing these occasional workshops with human givens, but she was doing one every 6 months or something. And she said, why don't you come along to this workshop in London? And I said, but I thought that was to do with your work. She said, oh, but you're always talking about how people think and how you perceive things, and you're always interested in this sort of thing. I think you'd find it interesting. And I thought, okay, if your intuition is good, I will go along. But I'm surprised. So I went along to this talk in London. This would have been 2001, I think. 2001. And I saw the most outrageous thing I'd ever seen, really. I was absolutely affronted by this man called Ivan Tyrrell standing on stage and saying something which I just thought was outrageous. He said, of course, we now understand depression. We understand what causes it. We understand why people get stuck in it. And best of all, we understand how to help people overcome it and come out of it. And I thought, how is it legal to say that?
Bold.
That's bold. My GP wouldn't agree with you. Mm-hmm. Who says we have an understanding of depression? Mm-hmm. What is this? What are you selling? I was very, very skeptical and intrigued.
I had the same experience. On my first thing, I was like, what kind of sect I'm getting into?
Yeah. It's outrageous. It's so extreme to say a thing like that.
The way he says it is the thing that really caught. I haven't seen him in person, but I've watched a lot of videos, and the way he said it is just so like.
Matter of fact,
1 + 1 is 2, and it's like I was really concerned.
And I was going, hold on a bit. But the thing is that he told me some things that I'd never heard anyone else say. One of the key things is he explained exactly why it is that when depressed people wake up after, and depressed people don't always get a good night's sleep. Sometimes you wake up and get very few hours sleep. But when on those occasions when you do get 6, 7, 8 hours sleep, he explained, or he gave a plausible explanation of why it is that you can wake up after 7 hours sleep and still be exhausted. And that was my experience, is that you wake up and you can't do anything. Yeah. And he gave a model for understanding that. I thought, I've never heard anyone else say that. I think what you're saying resonates with my experience of the truth.
It's so experiential.
Yeah.
That's the thing, really. You have dreamed so much, you've sapped your dopamine, your motivational thing, because dreaming or living it is the same, and therefore you get up in the morning and you're completely...
And your orientation response has been firing all the way through REM sleep all night.
That's it.
And so you wake up and it's exhausted. You've money on the floor, you couldn't be bothered to pick it up. You can't respond to anything new.
That's it.
Can't make phone calls, can't think. I went back for another lecture a week later or 2 weeks, and learnt some more, and then after a couple more maybe, I said to Bindi, look, this is gold dust. If we actually can help people who are anxious and depressed practically effectively, without any great overhead, without any great expense, if it's just knowledge that you apply, then that's a world revolution. We've got to be part of it. Let's drop what we're doing and retrain. So that's what we both did, and we both did our diploma in 2003. And it was one of the most exciting learning experiences of my life. And we've dedicated ourselves to trying to spread the ideas ever since. But it's not as easy as it sounds.
No.
The good idea isn't all you need.
That's kind of with meeting Alexi and doing or spending more time with Alexi and doing this course on pain. And then I started the diploma.
You're doing the HD diploma?
Yeah, and mainly because of my own issues, and I used to lie constantly, and I really want to understand more about my drivers and why, which I think I'm definitely getting more towards. I've definitely learned more as to what the reasons why I was doing it, or the motivation behind doing it. But part of that reason is wanting to be valued by people, which is something that I'm kind of working through at the moment. But that's also why I want to do the diploma, which again is something that I'm dealing with, because it's like maybe that's not completely the right reason to do it, but I also do just want to spread the word of the human givens and the framework, I guess.
Well, the mission that Bindi and I have sort of we've tried to clarify more recently, because we started off being human givens therapists, practitioners, and it's the most rubbish business model you can ever come across, because you get people sorted really quickly. I mean, the average number of sessions is 4, and that's for serious conditions like serious trauma and it's not, we do have some clients who come back for many more sessions, but the average is very low. So you're always looking for new clients. It's a terrible way to try and make a living.
Yeah, it's a whole thing about client and patient a little bit, really. So, and it's how conflicted you are as a therapist with that mercantile thing and the whole therapeutical part, really. And you get a bit conflicted. So some business models seem to be they keep kind of get people coming, and they kind of make a bit of a dependence out of the whole thing in a way, really, which is completely opposite to the whole.
Come and see me every week for the next 2 years.
2 years. That's it, and then that's it. And you sign just there and thing, and a lot of high volume chiropractic models, which actually is a business model in a way, is functioning like that, really. And I think it's a slow burn process, and I've experienced that in my practice here over the last 15 years in being in this town. And I've started with 1 patient the first month and 2 patients the second month, and I'm doing hundreds of patients now per month, but it took me 15 years. But it's a word of mouth, and the reason why I get quite a lot of patients is because they don't carry on coming.
You get a result.
It's very bizarre.
But don't you think pain is more of an acceptable or an accepted thing to talk about amongst people than mental health issues? Because if you're at work, lower back pain is the number one reason why people don't go into work. And so if you've seen someone that's really great and this person's in pain, even now, people don't think of that as a mental thing. And they're like, oh, you're in pain, go see this person, he'll sort you out, he will deal with all your problems. But mental health...
It's Descartes, and we talk about modernism. Descartes was a bit schizoid, and we still are schizoid. So we talk about physical pain as it's in your body, completely forgetting that it's in your brain as well as in your body. It's both of them, really. And we forget to talk about what mental health is actually not only in your head, it's in your body as well. It's the same thing. And I guess possibly the fact that cogito ergo sum is still really applying rather than sensio ergo sum. I feel, therefore I am. Or,
what's the other one? I think, therefore I am.
I think, therefore I am.
And I like it the other way around. I am, therefore I think.
Or I am, therefore I think. That's it. There's another thing, really. There's so much stigma to mental health, and there's so much barrier to actually approaching the whole thing. There is only a couple of ways to actually do manual therapy. There are 900 ways to do mental health thing, and that's where the regulation is quite important currently.
And I think that Ivan makes a really valid point when he talks about all those different models of therapy and says this is indicative of a science that's in its infancy. If you go back 300 years, we had alchemy, we had the early bits of chemistry, we had Aristotle's views on what made up matter. We had lots of different schools of thought, and if somebody studied material science, they wouldn't have had that name for it, but they would have said, well, who did you study under? Because obviously they'd have different approaches, whereas now, if you study material science, no one says, where do you study? Because it's a kind of an accepted global understanding.
Mendeleev
but psychology is still in those early days where there's all these different modes of thought because no one's quite kind of pulled it all together. And I feel confident that HG is making a significant contribution in pulling it together and giving a foundational base on which to kind of build other
as a framework, and after all some cognitive behavioral or analytical or otherwise could be just tools or techniques that can be used among that human given.
But you were saying that when you've looked at other things from the perspective of HG, it kind of, you get light bulbs going off because you can sort of figure out why things work and why things don't work.
Yeah, even down to the therapy I had when I was younger. Like my parents were very old school and thought I was very possessed by the devil, basically, or by Satan, and then my parents divorced, and so then I had some therapy, and even down to that therapy at that young, I know exactly how I felt and my mentality going into the room, and how that made me more determined to play the game that I was going to play in that therapy room. Right. And then I've been to therapy since. I've even been to human givens therapy, and I even didn't think that therapist was the right therapist for me, and I'm going to revisit things probably soon and go see a different HG therapist. Right. But the idea of it's the idea of different things working in different ways and working for some people He's like, that's what it's all about, because CBT didn't work for me at all. But then my housemate was like, it was the best thing for me. But then she had to have four different therapists, and the one that actually worked for her was a student. And she was very like, how are we going to work on her approach was very Human Givens like. And everything I keep hearing is like, it backs up more and more what I'm learning and reading. Because it's like, it's very interesting how as a therapist you can do basically anything, even stuff that might not even work. Like you can make up your own model, whatever, but if you do it in a certain way, you might not know that fits into the Human Givens kind of framework, but it does.
If it's aligned with the givens of human nature, it's going to work.
But
you see, I think that what I didn't finish saying earlier is that the real opportunity is actually outside of therapy. Because as we know that there's some still stigma about mental illness and about mental ill health in general. But the ideas, because they apply to human beings, there's only a certain proportion of people who are interested in psychotherapy. And there are many people who suffer and struggle who would never go to anyone, a stranger, to talk about their stuff. And we believe that the real opportunity to spread these ideas is to get the fundamental organizing ideas, not so much the in-depth techniques, not so much the rewind or the some of the more subtle aspects of interventions that we do, but just to get things like the needs model into schools, into youth work, into people
workspace,
into the employment, because actually the challenges that we're facing, whether it's economic, global, environmental or political, there's so much uncertainty. All the systems seem to be failing at the moment. And this understanding of actually what does it mean to be a living organism, and what does it mean to thrive? What can you say about how a living organism thrives in its environment? If you can encapsulate that in any kind of model and teach that, it's got to help. I think I've often thought that most of the problems in our modern world are caused by either greed or ignorance. But if we understood what we are, then we've got far better chance of doing something proactive about solving the problems that we face. So my mission has always been, let's just try and teach these basic ideas. And outside of the narrow area of psychotherapy, I love psychotherapy, but the opportunities are so much bigger than that.
So talking to you about it reminds me of that Polyvagal theory that you introduced me to. And
I introduced you to.
You introduced me to. Yeah, completely. So, and it was just like a light bulb moment again, because it fit into things so neatly. But I was reading the book from
Stephen Porges.
That's it. And it's from a psychotherapeutical point of view. And I'm an osteopath. And I'm like, I work with the autonomic nervous system all the time.
You know more about it than I do.
That's it. I work with that vasomotion and the whole thing, and know the experience people have from having a bad back is actually the sensation that your body is giving you on an autonomic level.
Yes.
It's the blood supply to the musculature or the tissue into your back that has changed, and it sensitizes it. Anyway, and so I had to do a bit of research, and I found an osteopath in France who's actually uses the polyvagal theory from an osteopathic point of view. And I thought, like, how awesome is that mind-body thing that Descartes has completely opened up and eviscerated and split us and tore us apart, is actually being brought back together.
Polyvagal theory has been around over 20 years.
That's it.
And yet I only really became aware of it last year.
Yeah, I've been aware of it like 3 weeks, and I'm completely sold. It's definitely...
It's true.
It's cool.
That's another example of where a really good idea takes a very long time to spread. Because you told me about it a week or two ago.
Yeah.
I spent this weekend watching way too many videos on it, and like most of the videos were like 10 years old, and I was like, how on earth is this not something that everyone who has anything to do with physiology or like or mental health is talking about? Like
even Human Givens hasn't embraced it fully, as far as I'm aware.
Not yet. Because that's such another organizing idea. That's the expectation fulfillment theory of dream on the body as well as the mind. It's just like it's amazing. You cannot do the polyvagal theory without having that whole expectation fulfillment theory of dream as well, because it works together. That's the thing, really. The autonomic pressure, that unfulfilled expectation is loading your autonomic nervous system. It's the charge of that. And that's the bilateral or bidirectional feedback mechanism is there, really. And it's via the vagus nerve. And I think it's just like completely... I'm mind-boggled by the whole lot. I'm completely sold. And I had written the outline of a second course, because we've done a bit of a theoretical opening of understanding pain a little bit, and then now we want to make it a bit practical. And since so I had really done your diaphragm, it's around the diaphragm, there's no diagnosis as such and things like that. So, and then look at the diaphragm helping you to actually live in a way in your body, help your body to live. But we look on the first part, and on the second part we look at the diaphragm helping you to think. All right. Because that's the 7-11 breathing technique. So there's a bit more with the phrenic nerve, which is like the vagus nerve, mostly sensory. So there's mostly sensory fibers to get your internal environment and all those kind of stuff feedback. Because that's the thing, really. It's a bidirectional feedback, really. So I was trying to really approach it for both ends. It helps your mental health to breathe, and it helps your health to breathe.
Yes. I finish all my blogs. I say, don't forget to keep breathing, because it's the secret to staying alive, isn't it?
That's it.
As long as you're breathing, you're still alive. If you stop breathing, you're gone.
That's it. But and looking at that polyvagal theory, all of a sudden it puts the spanner into my plan a little bit, really. So I think there's. Yeah, so I think we'll stick to the plan I've done a bit, and those two approaches and the 2 chapters of it, really, because it's really just.
So is this going to be an online course?
Yeah, online course. Yeah. So we want to spread the idea to the many, basically, and that's really that. The whole thing about modernism is, I believe that with a rational mind, everybody who has a rational mind, so I think the majority of us have, apart from people who are too traumatized or damaged, basically, from accidents or cerebral vascular accidents, type thing, it's going to be more difficult for them to achieve a clear thinking thing. Approach, and I think most of us ought to really have access to that kind of information. So a bit like you, I really want to come out of my one-to-one room, which is awesome, and I'm so privileged to be able to have access to the most complex structure in a universe, in a functioning universe. It's absolutely mind-boggling, and I so really feel very privileged by that. But I feel like there's so much benefit to the societal demand there is for a bit more clarity, and what you talk about, that's it. I think it's so people
and now
are
we have the way of disseminating the information.
That's it. Nowadays with podcasts and with online things, I think it's really giving people access and saying, really.
I've always been fascinated by exponential growth, the idea that things take off far faster sometimes than we expect. And I look around nowadays and I kind of think, when you see an idea just suddenly take off, it's almost like a supernova. It's like an explosion. And I think that the internet and because the challenges are becoming huge, then we're being driven to find a solution and to share a solution. And I notice everywhere that people are experimenting with different ways of coming together in community, whether it's online or whether it's in groups, whether it's with, what's that website, meetups, people getting together in meetups and things. You can look on Meetup and find an activity group in your area for any subject under the sun, whether it's sewing or spirituality or whatever.
My patient does a Stitch and Beach group. They meet up and they go knitting in the pub and they meet up. That thing, really, Stitch and Beach. That's it. And they love it, and it's growing because people are really enjoying the two things.
People work better in community.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's what I hope is going to happen with the pain course. Not necessarily the community, although who knows, the like spreading of like the human Gibbons framework or out whatever it comes out as. And I think the idea of it being something that's sort of used as a tool in schools, especially schools, because I have a lot of friends who are teachers. I would say the majority of my friends are teachers more than anything else, and they all have the same issues with difficult kids in particular, and they all have difficult kids, and I think it's such a waste. Like, it's such a waste of amazing teaching or learning time, depending where you are.
Yeah.
And I think that idea of a better framework on how and understanding on how to manage and then or engage children, shall we say, is great. And with the pain thing, it's like taking people out of their bubble, and in some cases maybe they're unhelpful or unfruitful groups that they might have found themselves in, communities, and trying to give them an opportunity. We talk about slaying dragons and the idea of like slaying a dragon and then the treasure that comes after. Before this podcast, I was listening to one of our other podcasts introducing the course on pain, the first part, and Alexi was saying, like, you cannot imagine the treasure of overcoming pain is unbelievable. It's like, and I have had pain issues, but I definitely haven't been in pain for like days and weeks and months and years on end. Yeah. And I can't imagine how soul destroying that must be.
I had back pain for 20 years, but it started when I was about 17 or 18, and when I track back to why I might have suffered, there were two factors that I'm aware of. One is I used to do a paper round, and the bag of papers was so heavy that you could hardly stand under the weight. And of course, it was all on one shoulder. And I did that on a regular basis as a teenager for pocket money. And then the other thing is that I was, when I was 18, I bought an electric guitar, which is physically the heaviest guitar you can get, same shoulder. And I used to play 3 hours a day, practicing. And I was completely out of shape. But I had back pain that was debilitating off and on for best part of 20 years. So at least once a year I'd be off work for a week, unable to move, unable to get to the toilet sometimes, and almost in tears. Well, I was in tears sometimes because I had heat treatment, I had chiropractic. That's how I got into chiropractic. I had lots of different forms of help, and nothing really worked until one thing that I changed, which completely cured my back trouble. I got divorced. All the stress went.
That's it. But I think in a way, at 17 you were not married, but nonetheless the way you were actually mitigating the effect the paper round was having on your back was not maybe up to scratch, and you created a mechanical strain and a mechanical compensation in your body that your brain tapped into a bit later on.
Right.
And it's about the paper. You talk about paper round, but you talk about pocket money, and you talk about supporting yourself financially. Yeah. In a way, really. So the association from the paper round and the mechanical and the pattern matching between what you were expecting to get out of the paper round and the mechanical strain you were under was already put together then, really. And then you just had to have a level that was not maybe manageable enough, and for the whole thing to go, basically.
But as you say, the relief when you find a solution.
That's it.
We don't value health until we lose it.
That's it.
It's the most important thing.
But often this is something that sort of confused me a little bit with Alexi's like idea of pain, because sometimes someone could change something really big, like getting a divorce, and then all their pain will go. But then the way that your body can build that up and then tap into it and then keep it going, and then you think, oh, it was the divorce. It was like definitely the divorce, but it was something within the divorce that you weren't doing well within yourself or supporting yourself in a certain way, and then because of the divorce you had to be independent and support yourself, and then you had these other things, and there's so many things that change when you make a massive life change, and that's why you need a framework, because people will be like, I had a really bad ankle and then I had this operation.
Are you telling me I need to divorce to get rid of my ankle pain?
And it's like, then you can have this massive operation, and this operation might make it better, and there might be a slight like tissue, there might be a reason why it's slightly better, but then it might end up coming back, and the reason why it was better might just be the fact that you felt like you were more in control with your pain, because someone who is incredibly good at their job is making it better, and then after that it's better for a while. But a lot of people who have ankle surgery, knee or hip or whatever else, often the ailment ends up coming back after a while. So it's like pain's so weird and it's so interesting.
I remember reading a report in a chiropractic magazine, probably in about 1992. When was the last big earthquake in San Francisco? Was it around that time? 91? I don't remember quite when it was. And there was this article surprised me because it suggested that there'd been a surge in people seeking help from chiropractors for lower back pain after the earthquake because of stability issues. That was news to me.
The metaphor.
I'd never thought that stability, that there was a mental connection between the physical and that. And of course there is. It's naive not to think there is. So yeah.
No, it's the perk of being human, really, and the main problem is having to deal with the pain you have today and the experience you're having today. And because you're human and you're conscious of being conscious, you got a problem of having traded today for tomorrow. And therefore, the expectation you have of what you should be able to do, would the pain not be there tomorrow, has to be contended today.
Yes.
On top of the pain today.
Yes.
And because you're human and we are gregarious and you know about facial nerves and like accessory nerve and all the posture from the polyvagal theory, we get a lot from being around other people.
Yes.
And we compare ourselves to others. So if your shoulder is buggered and you can't move it, bet your bottom dollar it's raining that day, you get to the office, you notice everybody putting their coat on the whole body coat hanger.
I wish I could do that.
That's it. And you compare yourself to others.
Yeah.
And so you have those three the archetypal, what is it the shoulder does for humans?
Yes.
On top of the expectation you have of what your shoulder should be able to do.
And when I was disabled by back pain, it was as much fear about would I be able to get back to work as anything else.
That's it.
It's expectation.
And so your financial security, your competence, your social interaction you get from work. We say if you don't work nowadays, if you don't have friends and you've got a substance abuse, your mental health is going to be difficult to go back to because you don't have a framework, you don't wake up in the morning, you're outside of the whole realm of getting independence and bouncing ideas with others, and then you substitute it with a substance, with alcohol, for example.
And most of the structures that in the past have held our communities together, like the church and like pubs,
marriage,
and they're dissolving. They're not part of regular life anymore. So if we get on all of those needs that you talk about through work, and then we can't work, it's like everything goes. All the eggs are in one basket.
You think everything goes.
Well, yeah.
And you think everything goes. Not only everything goes, and on top of it, you think everything goes.
Yes.
The two things happen at the same time. And that's the tricky part. I treat animals, and I can see that completely. Animals are in pain now.
Yes.
But they even thought about tomorrow. Like the sun goes down and it's tomorrow. It's tomorrow. No, it's today again. It's today again. It's a succession of todays. It's something you cannot even conceptualize in your head. And the suffering animals have is very genuine, but it's very present. It's now.
Yes.
And they do not suffer as much as we do, because of that lack of ability to suffer about tomorrow today.
Yes.
They don't suffer about tomorrow today. And they don't compare themselves to others. They've got no concept of what tomorrow is. And they've not, it's a very, very important thing. And people are so much more complicated. It adds another 2 layers of complication to pain and the whole thing. So it's the treasure you get out of slaying that dragon is ginormous, because the head space you gain from being able to be not having to worry about the income you're gonna not maybe have tomorrow in case of you being in pain today. It's just like the head space that you gain is the cortical access you have to do other things is just like ginormous. So I think there's that completely awesome
So
thing.
tell me, have you figured out how you're going to distribute the pain course when it's ready?
Yes. all sorts. There's like a Udemy, there's a Groupon, there's all sorts of things. It's a bit.
I actually,
and Elliot knows a bit better because he's a techie guy.
I don't, but I think long term, like I think Udemy and Groupon will get us some new people. And then Alexi has, he's got a client base that maybe 10 or 20 of them might be interested. And then with the first part of the course, we're going to offer it for £2.99. I think we've decided, and it's about an hour's worth of videos split up into 3 modules. And then we're going to go through and we're going to cut snippets of that course out and put it out there for people to view for free on our social media platforms. And I hope that over the next 6 months of talking to, amongst ourselves and to new people like yourself on the podcast and just having loads and loads and loads of clips of videos and just constantly put it out there, people will have a huge amount of content that they'll then be able to understand if they really want to figure out their issues with pain. Then hopefully there will be enough there for them to go in deeper and then get an idea of the context much better. And then once they've got a bit of a flavour of the context, hopefully they'll go to these courses that the first part's going to be understanding it, the second part's going to be managing it, and they'll be able to, it'll be like a much more concise framework for them to follow, for them to get involved with, put things up and like really act on and do in their own lives.
Right.
So I think it's going to be a bit slow, but because we can't say to them like, we've got the solution for, like we're gonna fix your pain and we're gonna do this for you and we're gonna do this.
We don't want to,
because that's not what it's about. No. But and some of what we're saying, again, I was re-listening to an old podcast about pain, was like, I mean, I wish Alexi kind of wouldn't talk the way that he does about pain, because it's not easy. It's not easy going to someone who's got chronic pain and saying like, it's completely your shit, by the way.
It's the same in psychotherapy.
And it's all about you doing stuff. Like, we can give you some information, but
you've got to implement
the only way to get you out of pain, you can go somewhere for a week.
This is why I'm interested to ask, because one of the things that it's taken me a lifetime to learn, I feel like I've been slow to kind of get to grips with this, is that providing information is a good idea when it's valuable information, when it's meaningful, but people don't change their behavior based on information. Mm-hmm. And you can look at all of the smoking cessation programs. We've got pictures on cigarette packets of poorly lungs and things. It's very clear that you can provide all the information in the world, but that's not the way that people choose to change their behavior.
Mm-hmm. It's like and Confucius thing, which I think is just absolutely unbelievable. I love it so much. I hear and I forget. I do and I remember. No. I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand.
Yes.
And like I said earlier, with my issues with like wanting to be valued and like really wanting to be like attention from people, I always feel like I have to give them value. And so I have a thing at the moment where a lot of my friends, because I'm learning a lot of stuff, if they've got an issue with their life, I turn into like a therapist mode, and I'm like, you'll learn this, and then you should definitely do this, and then this is what I think you should do, and 100% this is what you should do.
And you've still got some friends.
Yeah. Thankfully, I don't know how. And family as well. I do it. I've done it to all 3 of my brothers within a week, and I was like, I really need to address this issue. And I 100% believe that I hear and I forget, because that's what I always do.
Yeah. So I'm not trying to upset the apple cart, but one of the things that Bindi and I have been learning over the last 18 months in particular, and it's because of this whole thing about having the good idea isn't enough. You've got to get it out there. Mm-hmm. And so you've got to become visible, which is what you were saying about putting out a lot of content. People need to see that the content's there. But the thing that's really got a grip on my approach to spreading the ideas at the moment is that what people actually need is to be guided through a process, not just to be overloaded with information. Mm-hmm. And I just wondered if you'd ever thought about setting up a membership site where people pay a small monthly subscription to be part of a community, where that community are engaged in a journey that is about overcoming pain, because that's the model that I think has the most potential for our business in the future, which is that we've got the information, we can put the information out, but actually people get overloaded with information. What they actually want to know is, what do I do next?
So there's a bit of accountability.
Yeah.
So I did a business course a while back. Quite interesting thing, and the main thing was all focused on accountability. Because having all the ideas and having all the information and saying and having the whole lot was quite an interesting thing. But actually being accountable is really moving you a bit further forward. So yes, the information is there, but I think it's just really as well because when people are in pain and physical pain, I think there's a bit more access to different modalities. There's more people in physical pain who've seeked different modalities of treatment than there are people with genuine mental health problem who've seeked things. So I think with that Cartesian kind of way and the prejudice there is to mental prejudice, to mental health compared to physical health. So we are maybe as what we are selling is really physical pain relief. Which actually is a bit, people can compare different ways they've gone about doing it, and we really want people to maybe write a little book about themselves and go through and the sequence of the whole thing really. But are they really incentivized to actually buy the whole process and go through the whole thing? Is definitely
are they going to do the work?
Are they going to do the work?
I mean,
where does our responsibility? I think there is a bit that heuristic approach as well, a little, which is quite a difficult one. So I think, maybe it's good idea about that.
But with that, you still have to seed it. You still have to get people,
absolutely.
And whether we've got some ideas of like when we're launched and when people are doing this thing in the book and they're kind of like rewriting their journey kind of thing, like actually talking about what actual pain they have and then where that links in and what they need to do physically, and then the central modulation, the sort of more stress and I guess mental health side of it and what they need to do there. I would really like to figure out a way, maybe it's a membership or building a community, or actually maybe it's more something in the public eye on social media platforms that already exist, and them talking about, because once you find out a bit more of the reasons why you've got a certain thing, like whether it's mental health or physical or all of it, I think you become quite it's like once you accept it and you realize that this is something that other people have, and you can actually make a move, you can move with intention on this thing. I think it's really exciting, and I'm hoping that people will join each other in shouting about it a bit on social media platforms that already exist. But it's definitely.
But I'm just thinking of the iceberg, and the bit, what we're conscious of is just a little bit at the top. And actually, I mean, I'm interested to know your opinion on how important it is in your in the work that you do with your clients. Is that quite often knowing the answer is important, it's the start, but it's developing the habits, it's programming our unconscious mind, it's actually overcoming our limiting beliefs and actually reprogramming our habitual decision-making things that's going to make the difference in the long term, isn't it?
Completely.
Yeah.
It's a life. Is it a eating habit or a diet?
Right.
That's it. It's the same. So I think we are trying to really sell people a way of developing a daily routine to mitigate the strain the environment is physically and mentally is putting on their body, and how to mitigate it.
Yes.
But I guess there need to be some dopamine seeded onto that, and some motivation, and having accountability. Exactly. Yeah. So do we do a Facebook group, which is a bit too impersonal and not physical enough possibly, or do we have little conferences, or do we have an accountability I think the whole community thing and the whole membership site is really quite an interesting model, really, because it's people are incentivized already by having paid a monthly subscription about the whole lot, really, and but it's availability. So where does it fit? Who's providing the advice? So you need to. There's only two of us in a way in adventure. So how many we need to train other people to be able to, because I'm pretty sure we can cater for let's say 1,000 people
Right.
type thing in a way,
Yeah.
and having that weekly input a little bit and questions and maybe different formats, so online, and then we go on a bit of like a live kind of
speakers
interaction, and then we can demonstrate something and do like a virtual class once in a week or those kind of thing. But after a while, when the numbers start to really spiral a bit out of control, it's almost like education again, really.
Yes.
So
but
new level.
One of the things I didn't know about the membership world until we started studying this particular approach to it is the single biggest reason why people drop off those programs is content overload.
Yeah, that's it.
So actually, to make it successful, you often have to do less, but you have to guide people through the steps so that they're actually implementing what they're learning rather than just learning it. So you can teach them in a course quite quickly, but to hold their hand and actually help them put it into practice in a daily or a weekly habitual way is what actually gets the results.
I actually disagree with that. I think the number one reason why they drop off is a lack of a framework around the content or a lack of organization, because people have built their own barriers, and those barriers are based around unanswered questions. And if we get loads of questions from people, and then the idea is for us to answer them on this live, do a webinar, do conference, whatever else, and we really structure and organize those questions and the motivation behind those questions well, then and UX allow people the user experience for them to go in and be able to really find their things. That's going to take up a lot of work, but it's almost the same as a membership, but like more of them finding their own personal thing within it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know.
So I disagree with both of you, because I think it's both things at the same time. That's it.
And no, I'm right.
So maybe we haven't mentioned to Alec about the framework we are using, which is called the Penn-Gate model. So it's like a 1960s physiologists and I think pharmacologists were really interested in understanding how come people could actually
we can shut off pain
their belief system and the way they could mentally shut off pain. And enkephalins are coming into mind.
Yeah, I know a little bit about it.
Like gabapentins and amitriptylines and all the different petrochemical byproduct of all that, basically. And it's a very embryological, it's a very evolutionary, it's a very scientific way, and you got peripheral modulation and you got central modulation. That's the thing. And then so we got like the expectation fulfillment theory of dream, which could be the overarching model for that central modulation. And you've got like the ectoderm, which is the skin and the central nervous system and peripheral modulation. You got the mesoderm, which is like the osteoarticular and connective tissue realm, and you got the endoderm, which is the organs. And maybe you got that thing in between, which is that polyvagal thing. So how is it you go about approaching that? As I think it's really it's ginormous because it applies to not one person, so you can't really do an archetypal plan in a way, because it doesn't apply to everybody. But the framework is applicable to everybody because it's very physiologically relevant, basically. And to have it into a lot of people who have dealt with physical pain will have already accessed the whole thing via foam rolling or Pilates or physiotherapy or chiropractic or osteopathy. They'll have done stretches and things, and they'll have really done a bit of diet and things like that to work with their gut. So there's a lot out there of people having tried just the one thing. They're like really focusing, my diet is solving everything, when actually yes maybe for you, but on a bell curve you're really on the edge, really, and we want to really access that middle part. And having that framework, I think, is quite an interesting way. And we'd like people to develop a bit of a daily routine or a weekly routine of managing their mechanical stress as well as emotional stress. And seeing the whole interaction between the two. So the human givens will play quite an important role because it's another framework where you can get that central modulation and I talk a lot about dopamine, about serotonin, about endorphin, and almost like developmental or even like evolutionary thing, really. You're a jellyfish or you're a coral or a sponge. Well, the environment goes to you, or the environment takes you to the food, really. Or the food comes to you. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to be motivated at all. And once you get a central nervous system, and all of a sudden you go front to back, and you have to orientate yourself.
You have to prioritize.
And you have dopamine, really. Yeah. So that intention you have, and if you articulate it properly. So we are trying to get people to get their dopamine laden onto a model that is actually reflecting better their interaction into a changing environment in a way. And I think it accounts for quite a lot of a bit more of a minority of people.
Yeah.
And I think there might be a mass effect, but definitely I think it's a very good point actually Alec, with that membership site. I think it's the dopamine, the extra zest of dopamine that people have to actually go into, really, rather than paying a one-off fee. It's a bit like an ongoing kind of fee, and you have to do at least a year with things, really. We want to do like Thriva does a very good cortisol test with the saliva. We got like heart rate variability tools as well.
Yeah.
So more like, you could do your cortisol every 6 months, and you get 3 tests out of that, and then you can see a bit how you've increased a little bit or decreased.
Can you test cortisol here in your?
Oh, we do saliva. Yeah. Saliva.
Thriva it's like a American health. I think it's American health.
Laboratory
lab, and they have you pay £70 and you get a kit through, and you test your cortisol through your saliva. So it's really
first thing in the morning, lunchtime, late afternoon, and then before bedtime. So you got four readings, and it gets you an idea about like really high in the morning or not that high, and now is it you fit into that bracket a bit, and then you can really compare it on a long term, and then I think, and then. There's no nutrition too much, but there's simple things about hydration. There's simple things about really not to make it too complicated, and a bit like you're describing, a bit doing your paper round, maybe getting people to have a bit of a view, like actually it's not really my job who's actually the problem on my back, but it's more how is it I'm mitigating the effect my job is having on my back.
Yes,
both physically and emotionally.
Well, as I said, both physically and emotionally, basically. Yeah. So we're going to try to tap on that, but
how are you? Like,
our plan is. Have you seen the cards that we publish?
I'm really annoyed I didn't bring them because I borrowed them.
I've got to say here in my bag.
In 8 cards. Right?
Yeah, and. So we know the cards work. We know that we've got a lot of different people using them in a lot of different situations, and they generate a small amount of income. We don't make a lot. We don't make a living out of publishing them, but they are getting spread and they are getting used, and they're getting used by lots of different people in different modalities as well. So there are doulas in North America who run training programs that are accredited by the Doulas of North America, which is their organization. They've got the cards accredited as part of one of their courses. We've got street kids in Kampala, Uganda, who are being introduced to the cards through a charity, Brass for Africa. So they're all over the world, and we know that they work. But what we think the way to actually spread it more effectively, we're working towards setting up a membership site where people get introduced to the cards. But one of the things we've noticed is that people often they buy them because they're beautiful and they resonate with the ideas, but then they sit on the shelf and they think, how do I actually use it? Them. How do you get enough confidence to introduce them to a client? Because it's quite a big step if you don't feel completely connected with them. You're not quite sure how they're supposed to be used. And it always surprises me because I'm a tool user and I see a tool, I'll use it. But I've noticed that many people they think, well, am I doing it right? Have I learned enough? Do I need to learn everything about the cards? And they're more reticent than I would expect about starting to use. So the idea is that the membership takes you through all the stages of becoming completely confident and familiar so that you can start to use these ideas, first of all with clients, if that's what you're doing, but also with groups and with workshops and all the rest of it. And So that's the idea for the membership. We're building up towards it. We've still got quite a bit of work to do because there's a whole process that you go through in terms of planning to make it happen. But that's my dream. Is they say people come to a membership for the content, but they stay for the community. And if you can make the community work in the sense that people are making progress through a framework that is absolutely crucial, like you say, you need to know, what is the starting point? What's the end point? What do I need to do to get from here to there? When the community grows to you were saying once you get beyond thousands, it might be difficult to serve them all. Actually, what you find is that communities start helping each other.
Yeah.
They start actually coming up because they've been through the journey.
Yeah,
competence within it.
Different levels of people who've been there from the start and they really understand the cards, for example.
And it fits their needs anyway.
That's
it.
The other thing that we learned through a survey that I did earlier this summer, is that I was astounded to learn this. Maybe I'm naive, I should have realised before, but we asked people, what's the single biggest challenge that you face in terms of overcoming anxiety or dealing with anxiety? And I was really surprised to see in the results. We also asked them whether they were interested in using the cards for themselves or in a professional capacity or in workshops or with clients. And what we discovered is that, I can't remember the exact figure, but it was more than 50%, I believe, of therapists were also struggling with their own anxiety. And I kind of had this assumption that if you're working as a therapist, you've dealt with your own stuff. It's not true.
I think it's... I wouldn't be surprised if overall it's more than that, more than 50%. And that's only anecdotal. But I think
so. That's quite shocking, really, because but it also opens up a potential possibility, which is that actually, as you start using the cards and understand and introducing them to other people, you can actually start to learn it for yourself as well. So maybe there's an opportunity to overcome not only your client's anxiety, but your own anxiety through familiarity of doing it.
And then potentially make you a more effective therapist as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I guess therapists are in therapy because they need therapy. I think most of them. I would say
most of them have needed it.
Did at some stage, or that's the whole thing. I think with the journey, maybe about pain and people who are actually in an awful lot of pain and persistent pain or chronic pain warrior or mode. Basically, they're so good at being in pain that it's gonna be taking them such a long time to really work at it and grind backwards at the whole thing. Really, so. I get that community would be quite an interesting thing, and a different environment. It would provide them with a different environment, because we know from the human given that toxic environment is actually what actually stifles people in their progress and in their mental health, and I'm pretty sure physical health. So having an Instagram account and everybody's reinforcing your view of your warped view of what pain means and nothing, because you're experiencing it but you're not really an expert about it. It's not because you're experiencing pain that you're really an expert about pain. Otherwise you would have experienced pain but you'd be out of pain. And you'll be definitely an expert because you'll have found a solution or the solution for you for the whole thing. So by being in loads of pain for a long time and having loads of people churning the whole lot doesn't make you an expert, really, in a way, really. So that's maybe an environment which is toxic, which is what Elliot was talking about earlier on, really. I think is to provide them with maybe a space where expertise and the level of framework is and the simplicity of the framework and how you can create over it and maybe do a bit of crocheting or knitting around it is allowed, really. And I guess the community. So I have not. My wife is trying to do a membership site at the moment, and I guess I think it applies
in what area?
Oh, it's in childcare.
Okay,
but I guess. Yes, no. So it's definitely maybe not a membership site that she should be doing, really, because that's. Or maybe I don't know. Maybe I've not spoken enough to her, and obviously my rapport with her and my communication is maybe a bit difficult. But anyway, no. Yeah, okay. I think that's.
So I'm interested.
You sold us the whole thing, Alec. Well done. Thank you. No, and then I guess. Throwbridge and Tedbury are not very far, really.
Throwbridge.
It's under an hour.
Under an hour. That's it. And I guess that you will notice possibly that quite a lot of the people who have mental health have got actually physical health issues, and I'm noticing a lot that people who have physical health issues have got mental health issues, and that's why the central modulation is completely part of what I try to do, really, because it needs to be both ways, really, in my opinion, really. So
it's interesting. I never asked my clients about their physical pain or their physical health specifically, but I think I will be doing from now.
That's where we were talking earlier about, or I was saying about how everything kind of fits into the human givens framework. But again, that was only kind of actually only a small part of it. The two other bigger parts of things that really hit me was the theory of dream and how that links for me. Like, I think everyone I know who's got lots of pain sleeps really badly and dreams quite a lot. Right. And then same with like mental health side of things. And then the other part, which is slightly unrelated, is how people can be in different states and of arousal. Yeah. And from growing up in the church, I was absolutely like stunned by how some people they're like 100% sure that this passage means this, even though in my mind I was like, but it could mean lots of other different things. And with the human givens, again, kind of like addressed that, or gave some reasons.
So catexia,
like you could be so aroused by.
But don't you think that's one of the things that amazes me still the most, is how sure people are about things.
Yeah,
it's like, actually, when you look closely at what you really know, it's completely clear that there's far more that we don't know than we do. And yet everyone's got an opinion.
You should maybe go around saying I'm 5% sure.
Yeah, that's it. But
so you were talking about rational thinking. Everyone's got rational thinking. It's not always used.
That's it. But the framework we want to use is quite rational.
Yeah.
And I think that could maybe help people to be a bit more rational. But that's just on the outside, because I think it's a very important point. And I think Jordan Peterson makes a very good point about that. It's one of the guys we like to listen to with his podcast. It's about vulnerability. As soon as you're vulnerable, that's why you're so sure about saying. You stop,
because you're masking your vulnerability.
That's it. You don't open yourself to being vulnerable, because not knowing makes you vulnerable. So therefore you have to be completely sure and stop your way, really. And once you're conscious of being conscious, you're vulnerable.
Yes.
And you know good from evil. Adam and Eve are closed. They go like, oh my God, I'm naked. Oh my God, I'm vulnerable. So I have to hide myself, hide my vulnerability in a way, really. And we are the only creature who clothes himself because of vulnerability. It hides how vulnerable we are. And knowing good and evil is, if I know what is vulnerable for me, I know what's vulnerable for you. And therefore, I can use it to destroy you, or I can use it to help you. And I don't want you to. It's Achilles and his heel. It's my Achilles heel. Achilles is invulnerable. He is indestructible until somebody knows his secret, and his secret is used to destroy him. There's
an interesting take on that I've been thinking about a lot recently, which is, Human Givens puts a lot of emphasis on where we place our attention. That actually attention is a form of nutrition that's widely underestimated, and that actually it's a motivating thing that affects people's behavior in ways that they're often not even aware of. What we're doing now is for attention. It's to get attention.
Of course.
And when you know where you're placing your attention, you can also know where you're not placing your attention. You know where your blind spots are. Mm-hmm. But you'll never be aware of your true blind spot yourself, because if I tell you what it is, you won't recognize it, because it's your blind spot.
That's it.
So I think it's really interesting that when you think about two animals in the wild, if you can see where somebody else has their attention placed and where it's not placed, you can see their vulnerability.
For sure.
Because you can then, if you chose to, you can exploit where they're looking and what they're aware of and what their blind spot is. And I think that that vulnerability thing is very interesting to look at from the point of view of attention. So I talk a lot about, is your attention narrow or is it wide? Is it deep or shallow? And what is it not pointing at? What are you not aware of? And I think as living organisms, it's really vital that we start to be aware of where our attention is placed and where it's not placed. In other words, what we know and what we don't know, because there's a limit to what we can perceive. All the time there's a limit. But most people don't think about, well, where is the boundary? What am I aware of and what's beyond that? Those are the things that keep me awake at night.
I do a trick like that with patients.
Yeah.
And I'm like you now, I could do the trick now.
Yeah, go on.
And we can talk about you paying...
Fool me.
Well, that's it. No, actually, notice that you can fool yourself in a way with your attention.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing, really, because you pay attention to me talking to you, but you don't feel your sock.
Yes.
And all of a sudden...
Oh, now I feel my
now
sock.
you feel your sock.
Yeah.
You were feeling your sock, but you were deciding to pay attention to something that to you was more meaningful than your sock.
Yes.
And photography is another thing as well, like that, like the depth of field. So you see the forest and all the trees, or you see just the tree and you lose the forest, in a way, really. And dominance hierarchy and all that serotonin, and how you modulate your mood a little bit. It's you can't focus on just the one tree. You have to focus on all the tree in the forest, and as many trees as possible. But you need to be able to step back and relook at the forest to be able to choose the next tree. And
when we get stressed, it affects the way that we place our attention.
And my attention went to my socks as soon as you started telling the story before you mentioned the socks.
Because I've said
anticipatory.
And I was talking to a friend this weekend about this, and how then your attention also puts meaning into matter, because you're paying attention to what probably you find meaningful in that moment, and the more you do that, the more your body actually changes depending on that what you find meaningful. Mm-hmm. And that to me is like just such an interesting idea of like, that's why you should be careful about what you're paying attention to.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I've only really grasped. I feel like we've been talking about this kind of stuff for a long time, and this is again with that. I hear and I forget. I see and I remember, and I do and I understand. And when you start to, change your patterns a little bit better for the better. Like I used to smoke a lot, and like not just tobacco, weed as well, and other things as well. When I started to change my patterns of behaviour a little bit, then you start to understand more as to it's so completely ridiculous
when it happened.
Like why you want to be paying attention to things that are actually meaningful to you, rather than just like whatever, just pay attention to whatever.
And the overarching thing with all that, and the whole blind spot, and seeing somebody visual sphere a little bit, and therefore their non-visual sphere is about trust. Trust. That's it, really. And there's really that overarching thing behind it about trust, really.
Say more about that, because I'm not quite on the wavelength with that.
Because we start to talk about our blind spot, our vulnerability, you need to trust me that I'm not going to use it against you.
Okay,
that's really about trust in a way. So that's why you get to the pub, there's a pint, and it's a pint for everybody. You trust the patron to actually pour you the same amount than everybody. I promise the bearer to give the word. That's trust again.
Yes.
It's all really based on trust, and it's because having your £20 note, you have nothing to show. So you have to trust the
bank will
honor it, really. Otherwise, the thing completely collapses, really.
So what can we say about trust in terms of what we understand of human givens? Because I don't think trust comes up as a topic. But, I mean, obviously it's essential in a therapy room, and it's, I guess it starts with rapport. But can we say more than that about it? I had an email today about trust, and I'm still puzzling over it. What can we say? What do we know about trust?
Well, we can't know anything about it until we experience it.
Well, that's true.
And that's the whole bit tricky part of it, really. And the more possibility of you knowing your blind spot and refining the scope or the extent of it, the more aware of it you are, and therefore the more you can entrust others. And
it has to be two-way as well. It has to kind of be. It's just like rapport, I guess, where it's all very well someone coming into your therapy room and you setting the scene so that you can build rapport, but that person has to then be able to interact with you to understand that they are getting this trust. Because if they're just too aroused and stuff, then you're probably not going to be able to build It's just like...
So we can say that rapport is an essential, that it's a two-way thing, that it involves communication and empathy. But is that enough?
Because there's truth in the background as well. You have to be true a little bit. So when you go to therapy, you have to not lie in a way, or try to control the whole situation or things like that. So you have to. There's a bit that thing. So
control.
But it's a bit about control maybe. But I think there's a truth in the background a little bit. You have to be truthful or truthworthy a little bit, really, in a way. I'm not too sure. I think it's all quite big, but the rapport is really the way to be able to interact with the others in light of being trustworthy or trustworth.
I think maybe one of the factors that you need is an expectation of truth, isn't it? It's you've got to believe that the other person is not out to fool you, not out to con you.
Which is control, isn't it, really? Like,
I'm not sure. My dad taught me something important when I was young, which was that if you meet somebody new, and if you go into that meeting worried that they're going to lie or cheat or disabuse you in some way, then there's a very good chance that they will. If you go in expecting the best, then at least there's a chance that it might happen. But if you don't do that, then there's no chance that it's going to happen. So it's almost like we've got to go in with expecting that things are going to pan out in a positive way, haven't we? So it's trust then becomes almost like faith.
A belief,
It's like saying, I'm going to give it to the universe and allow.
I'm going to start with trust.
It's
like innocent until proven guilty kind of thing. Like I'm going to go in there with a level of faith that they're going to be trustful, and I'm going to do the same. And then until they break it, until I know or feel like it's broken. And
then that has to come from having trust in myself, doesn't it? It's actually trusting myself.
That's kind of what I meant with the two-way thing, because I struggle building rapport with people in certain situations, because I feel like I don't trust, like I almost don't trust myself in a way. And if I'm not going to reach out, if I'm not going to test that rapport, test that trust, then how am I going to get the trust and the rapport back? It's almost like you've got to. It's like it's a feedback.
And good and evil comes into play a little bit. Really, you need to believe that there's good out there that can happen to yourself and to others in a way, really. And in the scripture, I think in Genesis, at the end of the day, when God looks at what shenanigan he's been up to that day, he knows it's good.
Right. Yes.
And I think there's a certain framework and a certain sequence of acts and action that, when followed, leads to things being good in a way. And I think that's I find a lot of solace to that, because that homo homini lupus est. Hobbes says man is a wolf for man. And he's got that thing about you're really out there just for yourself, and you're just here to tear people apart in order to really reap as much as bit that greed in the background, really. And there might be a room for our society and the way the world is going to actually believe that it's actually true, when actually maybe that's not really the right sequence of things being done, and that not even about talking about greed, because you can be greedy for good things, and therefore you end up being greedy in a way, really, but that's another thing. But there is a certain sequence of actions that actually lead things to be actually good, really. And if you follow not that recipe, but that your nature, your inner nature, and like that dopamine and serotonin and endorphin sequence a little bit, or the appetite movement, or the pain gate, or the polyvagal, there's like certain things that lead to something quite positive in the end, because it's a bit.
But it's quite that interesting selfish model of human behaviour was what economics was sort of built on, wasn't it? Really? Do you think?
Yeah. You trade off the future for today for the future. Really, it's work a bit, really. So you have to trust. Like, you're not a hunter-gatherer anymore, really. So it's September. You got a pocket full of berries, and I've got a pocket full of apples, and then we come across the door and we give each other a swap. And we know there's no value of the wallet. You don't own any land. You don't own the tree. It's a bit peculiar. And then as soon as you sedentarize yourself and you become an agriculturalist, your whole mind changes really. In February, when it's shitting cold and you got nothing to eat, you're with your bowl full of the best grains you've kept for next year.
Yes.
And you still have to eat till September already. And how is it you cannot but be a little greedy about the stuff? Really, it's quite. I think there's and as the whole thing, we go back to what we were talking about when we started about the exactly. That's it in Turkey and or Stonehenge and a thing like that, to go from a matriarchal to a lunar to a solar type stuff. And how is it you sell it to people, and how is it you get value into things, and as it you mitigate what you lose, the compromise you make really. So that's insane really.
But don't you think that people are intrinsically, you talked about good and evil,
good.
But I've always thought that if unless someone is damaged, it's natural to collaborate, to cooperate, to do good things. I don't buy the idea that people are at heart inherently greedy. I think they can become greedy, and I think they can be brought up in a culture that feeds that aspect. But I don't think it's part of our innate being.
That's why there's good and evil, though, isn't it?
Well, is there evil?
Because the good, like you're not born evil, even though some people would say you are.
Yeah.
But you grow into who you are through nature and nurture.
Yeah.
And the nurture can give you lots of things that you end up being like. It can give you the evil, dare I say, or sinning to miss the mark. And then the idea of models or rules to live your life by is to try and mitigate that suffering and that evil with good. So although I definitely don't believe in.
You see, I don't think there's a dark switch. I think there's a light switch. But I think, and you can turn the light off and then it's dark. But I don't think you can turn the dark on. It's not my experience.
He transformed darkness into light in the first day.
Okay.
With his word, logos, with the intelligible work. He doesn't create light. He actually transformed darkness into light. With his word, with that logos, that intelligible, that intelligent word, in that articulated word, in a way. And that's really the first part of Genesis, in a way, that Judeo-Christian way of looking. But there's a lot of other things in the Hindu and the Upanishads or the Mahabharata, and I don't know, like there's so many things. It's transformed, but there's some. That's it. Yeah, maybe that's an interesting. I'm very. But I think there's good. I think there's no.
I agree with that though. That there is no like dark switch, because it's not really something that people. You don't like. From a young age, you kind of fall into patterns that end up being dark. And as I said, I used to lie all the time about everything, and that was. I'm pretty sure ever since I can remember up until 5 or 6 years ago, that was me. Wow. And I never expected to hurt anyone. It was, I stole as well, and that was.
Were you fully aware of what you were doing?
Yeah. Pretty much most of the time. I think the only thing.
Did it cause any tension? That you knew you weren't telling the truth always? Did it?
Yeah. But I feel like I got really, really good at it, but. I'm not entirely sure if that's true now, because it could just be that, like, I was very good at building rapport with people because I was playing this thing,
right?
And now I realise that it's still a play, it's still a theatre kind of thing, but it's just like maybe base it more on actual play or theatre and things that are actually true. And the people who I consider myself to be really, really good at lying to, I think it was more the fact that I had built like great rapport with them.
Right.
And it was actually I'd say my last girlfriend, really, who I was with for 3 or 4 years. I think she I've never really asked her this, but I'm pretty certain that she always knew that there was something that was holding her at arm's length. And although I would say that I would always say that I loved her, it's kind of like I'm not really too sure because I didn't really know
we
who
pick
I
up,
was.
we sense things we don't always understand.
And like the facial, recognition, like the facial side of things.
Polyvagal.
But I remember learning when I was I must have been caught lying when everybody goes through that. And I can remember thinking, if I'm not telling the truth, it's hard work remembering what I've said.
That's it.
And it came to me one day. It was like, oh, it's just so much easier if you don't.
It's so less to remember.
So much less to remember.
But that's exactly like I got insanely good at remembering my lies because I would have loads and loads of different friendship groups, and in each one I wasn't completely different. But I remember my 16th birthday. My girlfriend at the time threw a party for me, and I found out it was a surprise party, and I found out that my this is so fucked. I'd lied to her that I had a heart murmur, and to make I don't know, it was all a nut situation. But anyway, and my family were coming over to spend for the birthday. Then I had
and they knew you didn't have a heart murmur.
A few different friends, and I remember being like I'm fucked. I'm completely fucked. And during the night, her parents, were talking to my parents, and they brought it up, and my parents were like, "What? What?" And
your cover was
my
blown.
girlfriend found out, and just completely, she was like, it's his 16th birthday. Let's carry on with and nothing was said. And then obviously the days after, and then. I think we split up, and then we got back together. Like for some reason, I don't know why she. Anyway,
crazy teenage.
And she became a cardiologist. Actually, she's one of the best cardiologists out there at the moment.
Yeah.
Really. So which is
well done. At that point, I was like I have to change this. I really have to change this. But because it is way easier just to tell the truth and accept that you're not this awesome. Not saying that having a heart murmur was awesome, but it was like a weird, fucked up way to make her pity me and
get attention.
Get attention. It's all been about attention for me, and it's it's really hard to deal with it now, because even 5-6 years on after just being right, I need to figure myself out. I think it's only pretty recently that I've realized it's all about me always trying to get positive attention at all costs. It doesn't matter what cost it is.
Wow.
And over the last 5-6 years, it's not been lying, but I've tried to start a business with some friends in a few different areas, and so it's really weird. But my driver for attention, my need for attention, and I've spoken to my brothers. I've got 3 older brothers and a younger sister. I've spoken to my 3 older brothers about this, because they obviously knew that I lied from a young age and stole and stuff. And it's just and with the stealing thing, it was always, I always spent money on people. I would always we'd go on trips, and I'd cover if they couldn't make it at uni or whatever, and I'd buy them pints, because I think pints is what makes friends for life, obviously. and it's really weird. And I still, even though I'm not going around lying about who I am or stealing something to give to other people and stuff, there's always little things that I struggle with. And that's actually why I went to a human givens therapist, because I was like, look, I've got this thing, and I really don't know how to bring myself down in a situation where now all I'm doing is paying attention to kind of maybe. And in social situations where I usually am pretty good and able to really connect with people, when it's nuts, when the balance of people who I know just like me for me, when that goes out of, when it's a small percentage of the people I'm with. So for example, a wedding earlier on this year and a festival earlier on this year, when I'm with loads and loads of people and I don't know how to get that attention, I just close off, and then I become something really odd,
dorsal vagal.
And I at this wedding in particular,
big threat.
And
it's just so fascinating. Other people's lives. It's just, the things you've had to wrestle with that I never. I feel
even
like
after contemplated.
But that's because my life's been way harder than both of yours.
Clearly.
By your own doing.
That's it. Because and And maybe the decision we made of actually not lying because we thought there was far too much to remember when lying is actually led us to the way our life is now. And you not having to contend with that at the time led you to where you are now, which is quite interesting, really, because it's you're still a fairly good, well-functioning part of society. You pay your tax, you do the whole lot and thing, really. I mean, you go to work, you are able to do podcasts, you see, I mean, really, like, that's quite. I think we find that how complex we all are, and
how resilient we are. Like, you know, we can put ourselves through the most amount of crap for a long time, and then I mean, I do think now I think there's a lot of physical sides to really whatever. I feel like I've got some physical issues based on me lying and doing other things to get attention. And which is inevitable, especially as I run 3 marathons when neither of them was I really fit enough to run 26 miles. But it's a journey, and it does suck, and I do wish that I didn't pander to do whatever I could to get attention from a young age. I think it's been something that I've done. Like, I think it's one of the oldest things I've done. Right. Like,
I've done the same.
I remembered my earliest lie and was like,
same thing. It's the same. I've done the same thing with, I think, my sister being born and me being vaccinated, whatever, and it triggered the immune response or my eczema, and my eczema was to get more attention. And I'm always thinking, oh my God, I've got that land, and then when I talked to my parents, my mom was like, yeah, mate, come on, like, shut up a bit, because we paid so much attention to you. You're so focused on, you're so paying attention to having more attention that you forget how much attention you get. It's completely, you're warped, you're catextic completely. So I've got a problem with attention, and I think most people have got a problem with attention.
I've got a problem with attention.
or we have to contend with trying to find a balance in attention in a way. And I think that's in different pyramids or different on different trees in the forest in a way.
I think just seeing that it's a form of nutrition was like,
Bing.
Okay, that makes a difference.
There's the thing within human governance of like a baby getting attention from a really young age, isn't there? And how it's like a super. If you leave a baby or if you don't give a baby attention, then watch what happens.
They don't know who they are. They don't develop. Yeah.
Excellent. I love it.
Yeah,
I can't stop.
Is that us wrapping up?
That's the attention.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a question. Different topic. It's something that's it was triggered by your story, actually, your personal story. But I know that I have suffered in life. There are things that have hurt me. There are times when I've been distraught. There have been times when I've cried. But not much, really. I've had quite an easy ride most of the time. And one of the things that I feel sensitive to, and maybe oversensitive to, is an idea that I first came across when I was working for McTimoney Chiropractic. Now their logo is Chiron, the half man, half centaur, the wounded healer. And working in the healing profession, yes, I wouldn't be doing this if I hadn't been depressed. And I suffered when I was depressed. But actually I didn't suffer very badly. I saw, right from early on, I knew that it would make me stronger. So even though I wasn't happy being depressed, in fact I was completely floored by it at the time, it didn't take me very long to reframe it as something that would, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger kind of. And actually it drove me to learn about depression, and it's why I'm sitting here today. So I've got an issue with the wounded healer. And the issue I've got is the expectation that unless you're wounded, you can't be a healer. And I don't feel wounded by my life. And I just wondered if it comes up in your work and your work.
It does all the time. Is it because you are a non-smoker that you can help people to stop smoking? Is it because you've never had a bad back that you're able to actually deal with somebody who's got a bad back? I think it's about empathy, sympathy. It's about relating to people in a way.
It doesn't help to say you've not had problems. It doesn't foster a connection with people who are suffering.
Yeah, because obviously, I've had physical pain in different places, but it hasn't lasted, and I'm actually mitigating a lot of the mechanical load I'm under at the moment with the activity I have, and therefore I have no discomfort in things really. So I think that's more wounded, or the wounding, or the wound. I'm not too sure how to say. Really, is it a finite thing? Is that as I ended, or is it something that is ongoing, or is it something that wounded? Might be, or it's I mean, really, there's a bit that, and people who've got bad shoulders, people who've got bad neck, headache, digestive thing, asthma, all those kind of things really, and I think having the wounded part is enabling you to have a bit of a shortcut to build rapport with people.
Yes, indeed.
But no, nowadays being a bit more articulate, not having had the whole problem myself, I can figure out thanks to the needs, because I'm like, well, yeah, you go about back, but actually it's about the financial security it actually represents, and the fact that you can't go to work, and I can relate to that in whatever, because I've had the same thing. So I think the wound is just the content. It's not really, it's about the context in a way.
Yes.
And I think that's a bit the whole thing. And I think that's basically the wounded healer as chiropractic is what they have to actually, their burden really. I'm an osteopath, and it's osteon, not chiron, it's osteon. The root of pathology is buried in dysfunctions in the musculoskeletal environment really.
Yeah.
And that's why I have to bear. I don't know, like it's yes, and I'm not sure if I answer your question, but
I'm not sure what my question was. Really.
That's it. But it's. I think I'm a therapist because I would like not to be wounded very. I'd like to be able to heal from my wounds a bit faster, and in order to suffer less. I think with my rational mind and certain framework, it will enabling me to actually overcome some of the hurt that are out there awaiting me in a way.
Yeah.
And I think that's a bit why would I want to be a therapist in a way. That's the whole part. And I'm not deluded that there are pain out there that are not able to heal from, and some of the wounds stay open and full of salt and shrapnel forever. But it's part and parcel of being human really. So that suffering is what it's on about. That's the dopamine, that's the motivational thing in a way really. And you saying you've had quite an easy ride, according to who? I mean really, because that's
according
really,
to some of the people I see.
Yes, that's it.
And I see suffering hugely, and I'm motivated to do something about it if I can. But I feel sometimes challenged by an assumption that unless you're wounded, you can't be a healer.
But maybe you've always been motivated to do something about suffering, and you've been motivated to do that early on, early signs of suffering in your own life, early signs of a wound in yourself.
And now you're very good at not being wounded, and you heal really fast, and therefore
maybe
I don't know.
There's a difference between wound and suffering, isn't there? You can be wounded without suffering. You know, if you're in the present, like the animal you were talking about earlier on, the animal might be wounded, but it doesn't really suffer. I mean, it might be in pain, but
yes, that's it. Okay. Suffering in that definition. Okay.
Yeah.
Life is suffering. Full stop. And it's not fair. Full stop. And there's a few paradigms.
But life isn't suffering. Life is glorious. Life is pleasure.
But pleasure is the absence of suffering. that's the switch.
Yeah, okay, it's contrast.
It's contrast. It's a contrast between the two, really. Yeah. And I guess people who've suffered the most are the one who possibly could be the most joyful, potentially.
Right. Yeah.
Because they're able to actually weigh the more the standard deviation between the two grows.
So the more time you spend in the dark, the more you appreciate the light.
Well, that's
Or the more you are in the light, the more you enjoy being in the dark as well, or enjoy or experience being in the dark as well. I don't know.
Or maybe you just you're always in the light and you really really enjoy it.
That's it. That's another
without knowing the dark. But I think with maybe the word wound isn't maybe that's not quite the right word. Like potentially wherever that dude, whatever the name is,
Chiron.
He's
a satellite of Pluto.
Maybe the word wound might have meant something different. But what I was thinking is like, especially from a mental aspect, or the way I kind of view it, again with the needs and having like a balanced life, like maybe with those needs you had techniques from a young age or something that you were able to kind of keep those your view on how much you needed them fulfilled quite in check throughout your life, and this balance. But balance, and this like period of 4 months where you were quite depressed, that was like a bit of a knock, but then you were able to, I don't know, you were really motivated to act on that and get it better. Because I think with a lot of the stuff we're talking about with pain and chronic pain and then autoimmune issues, and the same with like massive periods of depression for like years, I think that's just ending up being in a vicious cycle, which I think is really easy to do. And I think having some almost like some mental muscles or strategies from a young age of just acting on things and getting things done without actually knowing that those expectations you have, you're fulfilling them, and then that's helping you come out of that state, rather than just not acting on them because you're having a wobbly day, and maybe your parents have taught you to like always just like
do your best.
Like
always do your best.
Yeah.
Or
always work before play.
Or you've got a half full glass or a half empty one, and for some of us, I think the journey ahead of us looks much steeper than others. It's a bit more of a bundle. Really.
I always like that saying that says everything that you really want, everything that's good for you, lies downstream. None of it is upstream. Don't row upstream. Let go of the oars and float downstream. That's where all the good stuff is.
All the
old hippie at heart, you see.
Yeah. No, I guess it's all water. I deal with water. I deal with 70% water day in, day out. So is it a lake-fed river or a river-fed lake? Is it a lake-fed river or a river-fed lake? You go downstream to... I'm not. I'm going upstream on the edge of the bank because it's where there's the least resistance of the current.
Yes.
And so maybe there's a bit of a tang of suffering in what I try to do in a way, but it's maybe potential as well. Rumi is really good with that. He talks about having your potential being a little thimble, and then you spit in it and it's full.
Right.
In a way, and then it's not. So you've got a very small potential, but you manage to fulfill it really easily, and it's actually there's not too much heartache and not too much difficulty doing it. Or your potential is like a bottomless well, and therefore
you'll never fill it up.
You'll never fill it up. You can, and put the swimming pools in it really, and it's not going to really even touch the bottom really. So all those things, and that maybe is a bit that wounded type thing really. I'll look into that because I didn't know chiropractors are an interesting. They are even more interesting than osteopaths now. From that, I thought we were really interesting in a way and quite different in our approach, our mercantile way and therapeutical way of looking at it, really. But if it's trying to really the metaphorical stuff is about a wounded healer, I think it's amazing. I find it.
This is where you find that they picked it on accident or something, or because it was a picture above their nan's fireplace or something.
That's it. Oh, well, the McTimoney are a branch of chiropractic as well, so they're it's a bit of a different than the whole structural chiropractic part, basically, which actually was 1875. And
D.D. Palmer
and Andrew Taylor Steele are meant to know. I've never met, but it's actually coming from a quite similar background in a way, and that American, that whole Protestant way, that whole medicalized type thing, the whole healing. We talk about maybe having been in contact with local Indians in a way who had a bit of a different way of actually the art part of it, and like that structure, governing function, and the rule of the artery being supreme, and treating the body as a unit, as our three core things. It's like human givens being in the whole lot again, really. That polyvagal theory being in the whole lot is the rule of the artery, the fluid, the 70% fluid, the hydraulic effects, the whole thing. But you've got like that strange interaction with people and that art behind it really, and the whole manual aspect of it really, and how that touch part of thing is really a bit that healing thing really. Not that it's not a science really. It's really and it's the profession by being regulated is really pushing that away, and it's almost his best asset to be able to play on those two things.
Well,
it's
a bit like in therapy that when they're testing new not in therapy but in medical world when they're testing new drugs, they want to make sure that it's better than placebo, and I'm kind of thinking, why are you ruling out placebo? That's the most powerful mechanism that we know. We should be using it. We shouldn't be trying to rule it out.
And as even better, there's nocebo as well. So again, that's the thing really. Is those the philosophy behind it and that whole Caduceus type thing, those snakes interlaced and Hermes Trigemist and all the Hippocratic Oath, all those kind of things really. I will do no harm. Well, you can look at medical profession for not very long to find that you're conflicted straight away on the first sentence of that all the time really. You give opiates and you dispense opiates like Smarties and you booby trap people straight away. I will do no harm. You've got persistent pain. It's not acute pain. It's finished. You cannot prescribe opiates to people like that. And you bypass all that endorphin. So you bypass 70 million years of evolution, almost really, of that way of actually that sequence of things. And it's a very heuristic thing. It's like, the booby trap is not even a booby trap. It's a badger hole, really. You fall in. Really.
You're kicking them down there. It's not like in the very way that you are setting them up to say like this is going to take care of all your problems. That just the very fact that you've done that, as well as giving them something that is also detrimental to them, is just like just kicking them off the edge of a cliff really.
And the motivation behind it and the trust that is imparted from the status and from the whole psychodrama and the whole acting and the whole, it's like a theater. You go into the doctor, it's a theater. You're already in an altered state of consciousness straight away, because being bush, you're like you're remote control really, in a way really. And the doctor is a bit remote control. I am remote control when I'm in my room, and I try to get rid of as much status, as much security, and as much control away from me, and I try to give it to my patients really. And go on your back, and people are on their front really, and you're like straight away, they're completely hypnotized really. And then that's it. That's it. It's straight away, it's like altered state of consciousness, bang, like that, and you have to trade so carefully there, because you've got such an influenceable mechanism there. Like whatever you're going to say is going to be taken not for gospel, but it's the responsibility you have and the duty of care that is there really, and the person goes on their back when you ask them to go on their front straight away. That's it. You have to be the control, the whole bing 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 bing. You have to be like very 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 cautious, because whatever you're going to say is going to be distorted or badly understood or whatever. It's quite, and you can manipulate. We talk about spinal manipulation really. Spinal adjustment, I'm not too sure. I don't know. It's quite. There's so much nominalization into what we say, how we do it, and thing, and people and
it's weird because you need that authority sometimes to be able to help, but it
comes with a trade-off.
Yeah. You want to get rid of it as well if you want to connect.
That's it. So I don't wear a uniform as such. There's no desk in my room. I tend to sit on a ball and I put them a bit on a high position and try to have as low a position as possible in order to really. There's an electric blanket. I don't ask people to undress. All those kind of stuff. It's all okay. The scenery and the whole theater are put in place is about their control. They need to be as safe as possible and feel as safe as possible. And I need to give them as much status as possible if I can really.
But
in a way, because I'm going to need their attention in a way, and I need to pay attention to them. So that's
interesting, because I've never thought of trying to set up any imbalance in status. I know that just due to the role that I'm playing, there's an implied hierarchy. There's an implied status. But I try to meet my clients on the level. And it hadn't occurred to me that maybe setting them higher might help, or might at least counterbalance some of that assumption.
But surely that depends on their own view of their own status and control.
No, because I'm choosing actually my clients. I am very aware I'm choosing my clients, and clients who want me to be the figure of authority are not going to come back to me because I am portraying anything but authority.
Right.
You are, or you
I
aren't.
am not portraying anything as authoritative.
So you turn people away who you suspect?
No, I don't turn anybody away.
No, okay.
But people turn themselves away. If people want somebody authoritative,
they come and they don't resonate.
and they want me to deal with it, because that's the thing. You go to the doctor and it's this problem straight away.
Yeah.
I don't want the problem. It's not my problem. Unless they want to have my problem to deal with, and I'm very happy to oblige really. But I'm not too sure the trade-off is going to be in their favor really. Okay, and I'm not too sure whether they're skilled enough to help me as well. Anyway. Regardless of that, I try to really. It's a selective thing. It's a non-verbal selective thing. Yeah. And a marin who left in March, and the patients I've seen from him, a lot have not come back.
Right.
I am not marin. I am not dealing with them, and I'm not handling them exactly at all like him, really. And the client who marin would have from me didn't really gel, really, because the position I'm
they
putting
expected
myself,
something different.
Exactly, that's it. And the implicit thing, and I think it's quite. But there is a lot of that because it's a medicalized thing, and I hear people calling me doctor, all those kind of things, and then there's no desk, there's no thing. Why? How did you picture I was a doctor? Where? Chiropractor calls themselves doctors, which is very peculiar because they don't have a PhD and they're not medically trained, and they're still allowed. Yes. To actually call themselves doctor
in chiropractic,
a doctor in chiropractic, which is actually ludicrous to actually call yourself like that without a PhD or actually. And why would you want to do that if it's not for the status? In a way, and the status helps you to control people. Possibly, really. And if you do an X-ray to people, so I know quite a lot of chiropractors who do that. They do standing, they do an X-ray, they show you an X-ray of a horse or something like that. You got no idea, you're completely blind anyway, and they tell you the whole lot, really. When actually taking 2 X-rays maybe would be a bit better because you could tell between the functional scoliosis or the structural one, or both. So if you lie people and you take an X-ray and you stand people, you take an X-ray, you see the difference between the two. But obviously, the chiropractor looks at the structure, and I look at the structure and the function. So I'm very interested in having 2 X-rays in a way, really. But those things like that. Yeah.
With the like therapy thing and setting the scene, as I see it, that's why I kind of think all the majority of the human givens, our emotional needs, are quite interesting to think about. I know they say with attention it's about giving and receiving, and I think that's quite an obvious one, but I think as a therapist or someone who's trying to help someone, or even if you're like setting up a dinner party or something, I think it's quite interesting to know how your level of status and your level of control is impacting the environment around you. And that's why I kind of feel like this isn't the right way to word it, I know, but it's almost like a two-way street on all of them, because like some of my friends go around to loads of different types of events and do games, and the way that they dress is very like grandiose but also ridiculous and really playful, and the way that they are and the way that they walk and they compare and whatever else is very like high status almost, but it's not about them. It's about these other people, and when they get involved, they're plucking people out of the crowd and getting them involved in a game, and immediately you see these people like go from being like quite closed off, and I've done it where I've not wanted to be involved, to immediately like part of the thing and playing a role, and they're not like bringing their status or anything down. They're
raising others up.
We already come knowing that they're in complete control because they're running the game. But then they're raising levels of everything and different people up, and that's why I find like play as a thing is like really really interesting.
Yeah, play therapy, interesting. Yeah.
And that's kind of how I see, like as a therapist, you've got to try and. It's not just. I don't think it's just about getting it right just for one person, though. I think it's about understanding what different people need. Like if you say to a patient, lie on your back and they lie on your front, you know immediately, now I need to be slightly different to how I would be maybe with someone else, where by the end of the conversation we're going to be talking about their mum and their girlfriend and all these other parts of their life. With that patient, you're probably not going to go maybe that far into that level of thinking. Maybe
I don't know how far they want to go, but it's going to be more I am a bit more cautious.
Makes you more careful about your language,
cautious,
doesn't it?
Yeah. And my actions and the way I go about, and maybe I'll start the treatment from their arm rather than from their tailbone or things like that a bit, because I don't know, it's a feel you get out of things really, but I like to give as much control, as much security and as much status to my patients as possible in a way, because bizarrely it's not a game. It's therapy in a way, and there's a trust part of things, and giving people a modesty gown is really playing an interesting game.
Yes.
Okay. What do you mean by right?
Modesty gown is like you put something, but you can't really close it in the back in a way, and the first thing you ask people is to go on their front. Okay, and they are butt naked up, and they are very exposed, and even I give you something to pretend that I want you to be actually safe in my environment, when actually what I'm doing is actually making you even less safe. And that's really difficult. I've got a patient undressing very happily, but I never suggest to people to undress. They come, they get rid of that. I'm like, well, if you want, doesn't affect me. I'm not treating your shirt or your pants. I'm treating you. That's it really. That's a bit the same really. And because there's that as well. And I guess in mental health and the setup you're having with talking therapy, you don't have that level of...
we don't have that problem to deal with at all.
So my Adam and Eve and the wall getting dressed and things like that is quite...
But I think there is an equivalent, and that is, and it comes down to the trust thing, is that sometimes people come to therapy, but they don't actually talk about the thing that they really need to be talking about. And you don't always know. You know, you do your best to try and build trust and build rapport, and so that they feel safe enough to open up and tell you. But sometimes you can have, half a dozen sessions, and then it's on the last session that somebody says, "Oh, I never really talked to you about this, but it's now I feel confident enough to tell you." Oh my God, he didn't feel safe.
That's it.
But maybe they didn't realise or didn't know.
Yeah, well, there's a million reasons why, but it's always a shock.
And it's that's the whole thing about really holding people in a certain place. Patient who come every month for years and saying, I am very non-suggestive. I do not ask them to do whatever. I try to understand a bit what they are going about, what they are trying to do, and things like that. And people are, when it's not moving really. Oh, you've not given me any stretches. You've not exercised for 25 years. and you're obviously not doing any you've never stretched. We've never talked about stretching. In a way, it's really quite a peculiar thing. So you need to really hold people in that space in order for them to actually do the therapy a little bit, really, in a way. And you need to try to be actively passive and passively active in a way. And I think it's the game. I can see the game, and I've got a cousin who's very theatrical. She's a playwright and an actress, and she really uses her body, and the whole thing is quite exuberant a little bit, really. And it's actually quite an interesting play. But when people suffer, I try to use humor a little bit when I can, really. But this part of suffering that is not really funny at all, really, and we ought to. I was thinking about that. I was looking at Nietzsche and the Nazis from Stephen Hicks, how they've really interpreted a bit his saying and things like that. And there was the picture of Auschwitz where it's like, work will set you free, really. The play, the whole lot, the whole sign behind it, and how is it you have to be, how twisted you have to be to do, how is it you make fun of something like that in a way. And I think suffering and pain and all that part of thing, you have to be quite cautious where you trade in a way, and it can be as bad and as twisted and as dark as that, really. And some people come and they don't really want to get better, and you can tell straight away, but they've got secondary gain from coming to you because they can say they've been, and therefore nobody has helped me, and you can play even more well the victim and all those kind of stuff. So if you start to have a bit too much status, having a low position helps me to manage a greater proportion of secondary gain from people a little bit, and it's a bit of a defensive type thing, but it's actually quite conducive to helping people to open up a bit. And
it's interesting when you get a client whose main purpose is to prove that you're wrong.
Yes, that's it.
It does happen, doesn't it?
Oh, I've got loads of them, and it's really interesting to not get sucked into, because you go a rational mind.
You want to rise to the challenge.
And you're there to what you think is trying to solve problem. And therefore, people who put you an impossible problem in front of you, it's quite difficult to not fall into their trap, really. And at times you have to really wait a little bit and collect enough things in order to be able to put a very simple thing. Oh yeah, I'm gonna wait till Christmas to start my diet and things like that, and saying, I'm like, oh well, great. Well, what about next year for Christmas then? So it's like this year for Christmas is no diet before, but what about next year? Because there'll be Christmas next year again, really. So how are we gonna go about doing that, really? Well, and anyway, plenty of examples. It's very awesome to deal with the very complex and very complicated structure in front of you, which their mode of reality and their sensory apparatus is already a bit warped in a way, and their attention is really focused on the whole part. And how is it you I treated somebody the other day intentionally on the wrong side. I treated their wrong leg.
Yeah.
Okay. And the next time, at the end of the treatment, was I could see he's quite agreeable. He didn't really want to argue with the whole lot, really. The next time he came, he's like, I had such a long history of an ankle problem on my left side, and it's much better. It's almost insinuating, okay, now you've solved the problem on the left side, deal with the bad side now, really, it's on my right, okay? That thing, really. But he's so agreeable about the whole thing. It's really, really interesting the way you get about doing things like that. But because you got quite a low position, he was not really holding a grudge on me. He got something else out of the sessions than me treating his leg, really. In a way, and I think that's where it becomes really complicated.
And quite playful as
well. And playful, that's it. And then you have to be a bit playful.
Well, it's different people, isn't it? Every single time you do therapy on someone, it is ever so slightly different from, well, it's always different.
And I guess maybe people, if I don't have any status and security and give them really electric blanket, you got electric blanket. It's like, well, yeah, I'm thinking about you. That's it, really. That's it, really. Being pushed, bing. That's it. It's done. You've done already quite a big part of the whole part, really. I don't know. I'm quite playful. I'm enthusiastic. I'm quite positive. I'm quite a bit not exuberant, but I think we ought to laugh out loud a little bit, because there's so many things that, as you said, you've had maybe quite an easy ride, really, and there are so many things you cannot really laugh about, really. And most of us in the Western world have not really had to deal with that in a way, really. Like you've not eaten a piece of bread not knowing when was the next time you're going to eat, really. And that's a different proposition altogether. Thirst and it's anyway. I guess we can go on and talk about all that for a long time, but is that position? How do you position yourself in a position of authority, of knowledge? And I tell patients that you know better.
Right. Yeah.
You know better how it feels to experience the whole thing, really. And you've not told me what was wrong with me. No, but we've talked about how it was affecting your life, and that's what matters most.
Yes.
Let's not maybe label the whole Rogerian way. I think the diagnoses are toxic. It's toxic.
It's interesting. I've had people who have maybe come to me struggling with depression, and I ask them always at the start is, what do you want? What do you want to get from coming to see me? And I'm amazed at how often they say, I just want to understand why I'm depressed. I'm thinking, how's that going to help? So, if you'd broken your arm, and the doctor said, so look, tell me, which way did you fall? When you were sitting on a wall, which way was the wind blowing? Oh, right, now I can tell you how you broke your arm. Don't you want it set? Don't you want the bones mended? I mean, the body's going to do the healing anyway, but understanding is like the booby prize. It's what are you going to gain from understanding it?
It's like the thing on the course on pain, where it's like we're talking about itises and not sciatica and these like as soon as someone gets
neckitis,
as soon as someone gets a label, they can then go away and be like, cool,
know what it is.
And that's the issue that I have, and I guess we probably all have with like autism. As soon as someone's labelled with autistic, everyone's like, oh, it's taken me years to get that label for my son, and now I feel like I could go around and be like, oh, it's fine, don't worry about it, he's autistic. It's like that doesn't really help anyone. It might ease your discomfort a little bit, but it doesn't really help anyone.
Might help you with benefits, might help you with
secondary gain. Because it's all laden with that a bit, and it's difficult because that's the thing a bit about selling the course, really. Because that's a bit there's a mercantile part of it in a way, really, to make it successful and to make it worth our while and our time, and the trade-off about it. We do it for the love of it, really, but we do it for what we can do with the money.
But if you can make money from it, you can help more people. You can reach more people.
That's it, exactly, really. And that's really where the whole model, and I think it's really something to think about. Alex, thank you for really opening our eyes and helping us focus on something a bit different as well, and looking at it from a bit of a different.
It'd be interesting to see our trajectories.
Yes, that's it.
And I actually think that links in really nicely to what you were saying with regards to like the different types, like the different ways you do therapy or different approaches with different people, because it's like that's great from like a therapist point of view, because not all therapists, you're not going to gel with the therapist on the first time, not all of them anyway, and that's down to experience, I guess, but also luck of you understanding the situation nicely, and then with the membership and / community side of things, so that's really interesting, because then maybe if the information's like, or the membership or whatever is organised well and people are helping each other, maybe they'll find someone that's into mountain biking too, and then they've got the same issues, they fell off and had to give up mountain biking, and then they found this, and then they did this part of the course and that really resonated with them, and now they're back on their bike.
The same wound.
Like, you can kind of find find the content that resonates with you to then go deeper into the context. And I guess that's the same thing with therapy and doing things maybe a bit differently with different people.
The thing that a membership offers that therapy doesn't very easily is closing the circle, because if your membership is designed around helping people get from there to there, from a start point to an end point, and you're going to hold their hand and show them step by step what they need to focus on, where they need to pay their attention, what habits they need to develop in order to get to a better place. I've lost my thread now. I'm just going. If you can, then you get a success story. If you can share that success story
with other,
then other people will realise that actually, I could do that too. It might work for me. With therapy as it is, partly because it's a little bit taboo still, there's partly because some stigma about it, and also because of patient confidentiality. It's very difficult for me to get a success story from my clients. I can't really, I do sometimes, it depends on their issue and where they're at personally. But it's difficult to say, let's do one of these, let's do an interview and share the transformation that you've undergone, because sometimes they don't even want to tell their family that they've been to see you in the first place. It's quite a private thing. But with a membership, you get the opportunity to say, look, actually, this is the journey that the people have gone on. This is their success. You share the story, you get more business. That's how it works, is that you're serving people, and it's the act of serving and getting the results that actually allows you to spread the message to more people. And that you can't close that loop very easily in the therapy world.
I've tried to, and I'm so grateful as well for the people who spend a little bit of time to actually do Google reviews, and I've asked, I think possibly hundreds of my patients to actually, whether they would like doing a bit of a Google review to actually get that social proofing.
How many people take it up?
There's 30%, which actually is
that's quite good.
Quite a lot, in a way, really. But nonetheless, it's quite a difficult thing, and I think there's lots of resistance from people to actually talk about, and there's no framework about how to do the thing at all, and then you get all sorts of one line, or you got like
you get people writing things that, well, that's not going to help anybody.
That's it. But it's nonetheless, it's people who rate a little bit the experience they've had with you, really, and I think that, and I see a lot of people who come with Google search engine who really talk about having seen some of the reviews, really, and they actually make their mind up about and the variety. Because just on the one review is difficult, but because if there's 30 reviews, you can read maybe 15 or 10 of them, and you get a bit of
feel for it,
an idea, a feel for it about the thing, really.
And even the negative, like not that you've got any, but I do marketing for other companies, and some of them have negative reviews, and some of them have gone completely nuts, especially when it's someone that maybe hasn't even been a customer. And I've been like, it's not even about getting rid of that negative review, it's about how we deal with it. And this is a company that has hundreds and hundreds of reviews, and it's like you're going to get judged on your percentage, which is really, really high, and then they're going to go in, and then they're going to see a 1 or 2 star and like a couple of them, and then they're going to click them, they're going to see if you've replied and see how you've dealt with it, and that again is like, that's quite an interesting
it's actually positive.
It's really positive. It's actually more positive than if it was 100%.
I always like the story that Idris Shah used to circulate negative reviews of his books, because he knew that his content, he was confident about his content, and he realised that actually it would say more about the reviewer than it would say about the book. So he was completely unashamed about sharing any review.
Any reviews, that's it. I'm reading the pleasantries from Mullah Nasrallah at the moment, and it's really, because I'm a bit cheeky. And
I didn't get that book the first time I read it. It just... What did I just read? I had to go back and study it more depth.
The metaphor in a thing is a bit, it's too simplistic, but quite interesting. Oh, that's good. Thank you, Alec, for coming and sharing a bit of
it's a pleasure.
Your experience with us and all those different topics, because it's awesome to see and to speak to motivated people and to really extraordinary people as well. I think it's great.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I very much enjoyed it.
No, we were like more than delighted.
We should definitely.
I hope there's some useful footage in it.
We should do another one. Do another one in like
6 months time.
4, 5, 6 months time.
And talk more about your successes or our failures.
I kind of wanted to talk about the innate cars, to be honest, but
that's it.
That might actually be quite nice to do in the new year.
No, don't spoil Alec little venture otherwise.
I'm happy to talk about cards anytime.
Because we were already thinking about maybe actually using the innate cards in our tool set, so there'll definitely have to be a link to your membership site for people to really, because it's what it's on about. If people really want to look at that central modulation and are really interested, who better than the experts, really? I think we can just introduce the whole thing a little bit. We'll pass it by you, of course, and because we can maybe get a little bit of a perk, you'll make even less money out of your cards, really.
No, it's money. We need to make money, but it's not the main motivation.
That's it.
Well, I mean, if you're doing the membership thing on the back of it to understand them and really make that tool super valuable to people, then it's like obviously that side of things we can get involved with.
That's it.
Yeah, I think it's a nice idea for us, because we use different tools, obviously, and for us to be like, these are some things that we think you should
invest into,
interact with, and you can try something else.
If you want to buy a tens machine nowadays, like in Boots, it's like 9 quid.
Are they that cheap?
Oh yeah. Nowadays it's like super easy, really.
Gosh.
A proper one would be.
They used to hire them out, didn't they?
That's it. You'd have to get a van coming to your house and a power generator.
Tell me, one thing I wanted to ask you. You mentioned heart rate variability.
Yes.
Is it HeartMath that you use, or have you got, what system do you use? Have you got a system for
measuring?
No,
not quite yet. I think we've been sending emails to people and to companies to get a bit of feedback about the whole lot, and I think you've received one.
Not
yet.
Not just yet. One called Fatigue Science is going to send one. They've got like an old stock of an old one. Okay. That's not waterproof, so they're going to send it for a couple of months, and then in December, if I like it, I'm going to purchase it. But I mean, it's super cheap, and this one.
What's super cheap?
Well, this monitor is like a wrist strap. Well, it's actually a watch as well, like many of them are. And it tracks lots to do with sleep and heart rate variability, and it looks pretty It looks pretty good, this in particular one.
Because a good number of years, probably 10 years ago, I had a system that was, it had 3 clips that put on your fingers. So it measured heart rate variability, but also skin transconductance. So it was like a lie detector thing, really. And it came with a game. It was a weird thing. It was called Journey to the Wild Divine. It was a bit of a sort of a hippie game thing. But what I did is I played the game, but I saved key exercises. Sometimes you had to raise your energy. Sometimes you had to chill yourself out to get through to the next level. But I would save the game at the key points, and then I would use it with clients for them to get direct feedback about their effectiveness of 7-11 breathing and things like that. But it's out of date now, and it doesn't run. The USB module it's not compatible. Things change. So I want to get a new system, and I tried the HeartMath system, and I wasn't completely in love with that. And so I'm just interested to know what if you've done research.
I guess for direct feedback in a therapy room is a bit of a different setup, because in a way for us it's really once you've got your daily routine and you go after a few weeks, you can really go back and visually assess the slight changes and the changes in your variability, in your heart rate, a little bit to get some feedback, but maybe a bit of a longer lasting, and then your sleep, your slow wave, and your dream part, and how much
and it measures
changes.
That as well, does it?
Yes, that's it with your activity. And how,
so I definitely want to connect with you and find out more about that.
Yeah, well, I think with all of this stuff, I need to start including the podcasts and stuff. I want to write blog posts about them, so that it's nice to link to you and what you're doing, as well as having some clips on the video or the whole thing. And I want to write something about, because I've reached out to maybe 6 or 7 different companies, and that will kind of link into some information to do with the course, because the majority of the heart rate variability monitors and sleep trackers, there's so many that do both now, and the vast majority of them are the same. The only reason I was swaying towards fatigue science as a thing was because A, I've never heard of it, and B, Alexi found it and liked some of the initial stats and things.
And they've used it for Crossrail. They've used it into big projects.
Yeah, in high risk environments.
To look at fatigue of workers, to be able to assess maybe danger to their life and to life of others in really quite peculiar tunneling and all those kind of things. You don't want. So they wanted to really have a bit of a feedback to people's amount of stress.
So they knew what stress levels
they go on, and maybe give them, if the whole person was expressing a need to actually have a bit of time off, in light of the whole thing, be like, it might be actually advised to do the whole thing.
It might be better to choose a different employee to stay on late and do next time. That's it. And the people who started it and are managing it and following its growth, a lot of them are military based and have been doing that kind of thing within the military for a long period of time. And then the final thing for me, well, actually the final 2 things was A, it's really reasonably priced, unbelievably reasonably priced. I think it's £115 for the unit, and then a 12-month subscription. They haven't got back to me on like how much a renewal is after that, but even that price is less than most of the competitors because of the analytics, and it uses an analytics framework, I guess, called HEAP. And HEAP is, it like takes lots of information and then gives it out in a really, really nice, like user-friendly way. And on top of that, you can download the raw data into an Excel sheet, and if you want to do your own thing with it, you can do that. So for me, they've thought about everything apart from how waterproof it is. They said in showers it's not very good, which is why they've actually stopped selling it. You can't buy it, and the new one is coming out in December.
When I started using my system, I discovered that my own practice of 7-11 breathing didn't take me as quickly as it could. And using the biofeedback, I was able to train and figure out what to do in here in order to make it more effective. And it made a really radical difference on my ability to stimulate my parasympathetic nervous system quickly. I would never have got there without the biofeedback. I thought I was doing it effectively, but actually the measurements were telling me it's not quite hitting it. But eventually I was able to nail it and actually get it down really, really quickly. And that was a valuable learning experience. But I'd love to have biofeedback again.
That's
And the technology's moved on a lot since I did.
That's it.
I think wearables are really, really useful, and I'm a little bit apprehensive about it because I feel like I'm going to find out that I'm not as like that. I'm going to have
chilled as you want to be.
high heart rates during times,
Yeah.
and I need to do something about it. But that's kind of why it's going to be great because it's like live monitoring, and then you're like, oh, during that situation, I'm getting like. I'm getting really aroused and need to do something about it to bring myself down.
Yeah.
And maybe that, at work, maybe that means go for a walk, do some breathing, come back or whatever.
But they talk about cold shower as well. They talk
Yeah.
about a part of the diet. They talk about sleep. They talk about interval exercising, and they talk about breathing exercises to actually influence your heart rate variability. So there's different tools and things like that you can really look into a little bit, really to solidify a bit that parasympathetic and stimulate.
Fatigue science.
Fatigue science.
Fatigue
Yes,
science.
that's it.
Good.
Really interesting because they've applied it, and they applied it for the right reason, and I thought it was like really an awesome for the workforce in a quite time constrained and really we know about the Crossrail and how much sticks they got from the wall lot, but there's not been too many dead people on the wall lot, really. Imagine, because on top of being out of budget and the wall lot and late and things like that, if they had like a pile of corpse.
They came across the corpses, but they were already there.
That's it. Oh, well, yes, that's it. In different places, very interesting archaeological things, really, no doubt. No, heart rate variability, the whole 3VAR cortisol test, really. And I think that's really a couple of the tools we want to try to promote for people to get feedback and for people to be able to track the effect of our course. I think we wanted a bit of infographic and the whole card. Your innate cards are really, and with maybe some of the tutorial, I don't know, like you could maybe do one of our tutorial part to introduce it a bit better for people with physical pain, maybe a little bit with a tongue like that, and then maybe that's an alleyway for people to go on your membership. Really.
After tonight, I'm certainly going to be thinking more about people's physical health as well, because I've not opened my mind to the possibilities of that before. So
and it was really the book on Polyvagal, and I was like, come on, it's what I work with day in, day out. Come on, there must be, and because Porget's book is really, I've not even touch 10% of the whole thing. Really, I've just glanced on the whole principle and the whole anatomical.
It's the Deb Dana book that I prefer in a way. She makes it so practical.
Practical, that's it. The practical. And I was not maybe as interested in the mental health practicability. I was more interested in the manual thing because I want to influence it in that fashion because that's my expertise in a way, really. And finding, and then by actually looking at the whole lot, bang, I came across he just wrote the book like last year, so it's really quite and I've not found any other thing out there, and it's from it's a foreword from a couple of the guys I follow in osteopathy, and I don't know too many people and the whole stuff, and they've made a foreword about the stuff. It's excellent quality, and there's loads of technique and lots of practical thing from a physical part of view, really, which I anyway, so
what's the book called?
It's in French, so it's about like the polyvagal theory and osteopathy. It's quite interesting. I think I've got I think I could maybe find the whole thing just here in 5 seconds and say it in French for you, which might not mean too much to you. But
I'm fluent in French.
Fluent? Good.
Yeah.
My mum was a French
bon.
teacher. I don't speak French.
Gallery.
Languages do not stick in my mind, including English.
I was pretty good at Fortran and basic C++.
Fortran? What's that? That's a coding language. No, is it? Yeah.
Fortran.
Why do I know Fortran?
It's back in the 70s.
I know. I just got the whole polyvagal, the transformative power of feeling safe, and there was just the interesting thing about the guardian, the fear, the doubt, and orgueil is a pride. So his model of doing the whole thing and organizing the whole thing is quite an interesting way.
What was the author?
There's that French author, that French osteopath. Thing. I don't think it's even translated in English at all. So that was the whole thing. So
that's not going to work.
That's a bit the problem about the thing, really. And but because it was like those two ways, is that bi-directional feedback from the body to the mind and the mind to the body. And I think it was really quite interesting. When I came out of your practice, I was like, I bought the whole, and I read most of the whole first part and not maybe the practical, because I was like, come on, it must be some things I can really use in my own practice. Really. No. And read it maybe in a different language was quite an interesting thing. And seeing it from it's actually, he talks about the central modulation part of it as well, the whole thing, and I'm pretty sure they were talking about the physical effect it has on people from an anxiety point of view and the experiential thing people are having from it, really, from the vagus dysfunctions, really. So
it's good stuff.
Good stuff. There's too much to talk about in one go, and I'm very upset now.
Should we call it that?
Yes.
Oui.
It's too late otherwise.